There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Order, honorable members. Honorable members, the first item on the order paper is member statements. Does any member of the ANC wish to make a statement? The ANC.
ANC welcomed the results from Operation Zivuseni, an investigation launched by PRASA last year into the discovery of ghost workers. About 1,159 employees vanished from the payroll system of the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa in a single day when the parastatal launched the investigation. The disappearance of these people saved PRASA 200 million in salaries that were paid to people who were earning salaries but not doing any work for the agency. PRASA also noticed that its salary bill had dropped by 20 million a month during the investigations. Those who vanished included the lowest paid worker up to assistant managers. A total of 3,000 employees failed to present themselves for the verification process. The investigation was conducted with the support of Home Affairs, the South African Revenue Service, Umalusi, and the South African Qualifications Authority. The Special Investigating Unit has been brought in to investigate, as PRASA believed that those who resigned could be working with someone inside the company. Those within the outside PRASA responsible for the creation and payment of these ghost workers must fully account for this act of corruption.
Honorable member, your time has expired. The DA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Democratic Alliance would like to congratulate Alderman Tanya Campbell following her re-election as Executive Mayor of the City of Ekurhuleni. Once again, we saw an attempt by the coalition of corruption to bring an end to the hard work and dedication that the multi-party government has brought to this great city. Once again, we watched the ANC and their cronies trying to get their hands back on the finances of Ekurhuleni. And once again, we saw them fail dismally as the corrupt cabal struggled to even agree amongst themselves. This poor attempt at political point scoring has failed, and now the multi-party government can continue with the work it has been doing to fix what the ANC broke. But these political shenanigans have come at a cost, a financial cost and a cost in terms of service delivery. Putting an entire metropolitan municipality on pause while backroom deals are done leaves residents neglected and uncertain as to what will happen next. Now that the ANC and its proxy parties are done playing, we will get back to working for the residents of this fine city. The multi-party coalition has spent 10 months working to undo the damages caused by the ANC over the past 2 decades. We have managed to achieve a number of successes and have been able to bring changes for the better to the lives of many of our residents. From the opening of a skills center in Vosloorus, to early childhood development centers in Palm Ridge and Katlehong, from electrifying 1,367 households which previously had no power, to installing over 48 water points, from cleaning and rehabilitating 112 illegal dumping hotspots to more than 48 kilometers of roads being rehabilitated and 47 independent power producers appointed to assist in ending load shedding. The DA-led multi-party coalition
Honorable
government
member,
will
your
continue
time is now
striving
expired.
to improve service
The
delivery to the
EFF.
residents of Ekurhuleni.
Chair,
The EFF.
as Chairperson, while we are all subjected to electricity blackouts on a regular basis, the people of Bethlehem in the Hlabi local municipality, Senegal in Sesotho municipality, and some parts of Kwakwa in Malutia-Pofung in the Thabo Mofokeng district are condemned to water blackouts. These municipalities just cut water without notice or explanation. People don't know why they don't have water, and they also don't know when the water will come back. The only people who have clean and reliable water are people who can afford JoJo tanks. The rest are expected to drink water with animals. In the Tablings local municipality, the money allocated to fix water pumps in Spoor Dam has disappeared, and no one is being held accountable for the disappearance of the public money. In Kwakwa, Malutiapofu municipality, this municipality has completely collapsed, and our people have not received water. And the minister sitting here cannot tell us where our people must get water from, despite the Sterkfontein Dam in close proximity. If you collapse the municipality, where must people get water to drink, cook and wash? We sit here with bottled water, but our people do not have water to drink. And we think this is acceptable. It is not acceptable, Honorable Chair. And we want to make it that very clear. Our people need water and cannot wait. Can the minister tell us what the people of Bethlehem, Senegal, and Kwakwa in Tarichaba should do when they have got no water? What is it that they should do?
Honourable Member, your time is now expired. Thank you. The ANC.
Chairperson, a new deep space ground station being built in South Africa's semi-desert Karoo region will come online by 2025 to help track history-making NASA missions to the moon and beyond. Through its Artemis program, which aims to land the first woman or Black person on the moon by 2025, the US National NASA is targeting the month of November for an inaugural launch of its next generation rocket ship, delayed for weeks by technical setbacks and bad weather. Fontein, which is only the third primary site being developed globally, will become part of a network of other ground stations in the United States and Australia. Designed with an array of antennas, including a 3-story, 20-meter, 22-yard diameter dish being procured by NASA, the station will help improve coverage and redundancy for critical mission support to the moon, Mars, and beyond. The South African National Space Agency will establish, operate, and maintain the station. South Africa has committed an initial 70 million, which is 3.93 million US dollars, to build the infrastructure and communication needed to be ready on site. The infrastructure and communications needed to be ready on site, part of the government's investment in building its space infrastructure and research base. We thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The IFP.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. We are at the core of one of the biggest scars in the agricultural sector. We are watching with angst while the livelihood of thousands are at risk. The biggest sugar producing company is at the perils of demise, and the impact its end will have cannot be salvaged. Tongaat Hewlett has contributed immensely to the health of our agricultural sector and employment opportunities. It has been the bedrock and foundation of the KwaZulu-Natal economy, sugar production, and provider of thousands of jobs in the country. In a very poor employment dispensation, we cannot afford to have thousands without jobs or incomes. The small-scale farmers and cane growers are at the receiving end of this injustice, with little or no protection offered as a cushion. The IFP pleads with the powers that be and government departments such as the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition to actively participate in the attempts to shield our people from the agricultural giants' woes. Our current reality does not allow us to sit and do nothing while the livelihoods of thousands are at risk. We have to be more active than ever to ensure that our people and the economy do not crumble down. The reality is that the shutting down of Tongaat Hewlett would have effects that nobody can ever quantify or fully counter. Our concern is that the company's small-scale farmers and workers will pay for the maladministration of a few, which we cannot allow. We cannot watch this catastrophe happen while sitting. We need proactive measures to protect our economy and our people. And the government is the last line of defense.
Honourable Member,
and we
your
trust they
time
will
has
act.
expired.
Thank you. Thank you.
FF Plus.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. In response to newspaper articles carrying comments from COs about heavily armed criminals masquerading as community representatives, door-stopping construction sites, disrupting operations and demanding protection money or a share of a contract, President Cyril Ramaphosa said in the State of the Nation address more than 2 years ago that he prioritized the growing problem of criminal groups that extort money from construction and other businesses. Specialized units bringing together the SA Police Service and the National Prosecuting Authority were mandated to combat these crimes of economic disruption. In 2019, at least 183 infrastructure and construction projects worth more than 63 billion rand had been affected by these disruptions across the country, to name Eskom and Transnet but a few. The success of the various industrial mafia is a result of the government's incompetent handling of the problem, which has now developed into a national crisis that threatens to scare away capital and skills on an alarming scale, and harm most of the communities these so-called business forums claim to represent. The Freedom Front Plus will investigate further and act against any further form of continuous neglect of the ANC government in this regard. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you, the House Chair. The ANC welcomes the report by NATO and the Polish government that a missile that struck and killed 2 citizens in a village in the eastern Poland on Tuesday, the 15th of November, was an accidental hit by a stray Ukrainian air defense rocket. It is now confirmed that the missile that hit the grain facility near the border of Ukraine was probably an old S-300 rocket, likely being used as a Ukrainian defense missile. Initially, Russia was heavily suspected of firing the missile. The blast raised global alarm that Ukrainian conflict could spill into neighboring countries. South Africa must continue to reiterate its position that the UN Security Council should play a constructive role in resolving this almost 9-month conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The General Assembly should create a condition conducive for dialogue, mediation, and diplomacy. As a country, we always maintain our stance of upholding dialogue, diplomacy as mechanism that can bring about peace settlement to the conflict. These are principles informed by the United Nations Charter on the International Relations. We are calling for an end of this conflict for peace to prevail. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Democratic Alliance.
Chairperson, I believe there is a technical problem. I will take the statement. Voorsitter, na afloop van die taaldebakel wat deur die internasionale filmster Charlize Theron van Benoni veroorsaak is, bevestig ek graag hiermee dat daar meer as 44 lede in die Demokratiese Alliansie se diverse multikulturele parlementêre caucus is wat Afrikaans kan praat. Afrikaans word as die mees diverse taal in Suid-Afrika beskou en is ook die 3de grootste taal in die land wat deur ongeveer 12,2% van ons land se inwoners van uiteenlopende agtergronde gepraat word. Die DA het onlangs veldtogte geloods om die Afrikaanse taalmonument teen aanslae van minister Nathi Mthethwa en sy departement te beskerm. Ons veg ook al jare lank vir die bemagtiging en beskerming van Afrikaans as onderrigtaal by die Universiteit Stellenbosch, waar daar verskeie pogings was om Afrikaans as onderrigmedium uit te wis, as ook dat die departement van hoër onderwys Afrikaans as die inheemse taal wat dit is, erken in die departement se nuwe taalbeleid. Ons inheemse tale is nie eenvoudig net meganismes vir kommunikasie tussen moedertaalsprekers nie, maar dien ook 'n verskriklike belangrike rol om uitdrukking te gee aan ons unieke Suid-Afrikaanse identiteite, kulture en erfenisse. Dit is dus baie jammer dat soveel geld en energie deur die ANC-regering vermors word om Afrikaans te belaster, terwyl ons land se ekonomie en infrastruktuur verkrummel. Selfs hier by die parlement moes ons lede wat op die Justisie en Korrektiewe Dienste Portefeulje Komitee dien, ernstig beswaar maak teen die aanstootlike uitsondering en teikening van Afrikaans in die wetsontwerp oor die voorkoming van haatmisdaad en haatspraak. Ek wil graag die inheemse taalverbruikers en veral Afrikaans sprekendes verseker dat die DA sal aanhou om op te staan vir
Honourable Member, your time is now expired.
Dankie, voorsitter.
The ACDP.
House Chairperson, in a desperate attempt to keep businesses going and the lights on, Germany has turned to its most reliable energy source, which is fossil fuel. At least 20 coal-fired power plants nationwide are reportedly being resurrected or are extended past their closing date to ensure that Germany has enough energy to get through their winter. In January, government and regional leaders in Germany agreed on a plan to phase out coal-fired power stations by 2038. There are also reports that they are planning to open a new coal-fired power plant this year. According to data from the US nonprofit Global Energy Monitor, The Udangudi plant is one of the nearly 200 coal-fired power stations under construction in Asia, including 95 in China, 28 in India, and 23 in Indonesia. With these constructions, jobs are being created for locals, while in South Africa, power stations are being shut down and jobs are being lost. The ACDP would like to know why government allows Western leaders to pressurize South Africa into moving away from reliance on coal-powered to green energy, while countries such as Germany are allowed to move back to fossil fuel to keep their businesses going and their lights on. Thank you.
The ANC.
No.
The ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Every year, the 29th of November marks the International Day of Solidarity with the people of Palestine. It's a day to remember that the Palestinian people have not yet attained certain inalienable rights, including national independence and sovereignty. More than 8 million Palestinian people live in the Palestinian territory occupied by Israel. This territory has been occupied since the 6th day of war in 1967, when Israel defeated Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. The government and the people of South Africa must join the international community in reiterating our unwavering solidarity with the people of Palestine. South Africa urges the global community to act purposely towards a just and peaceful end of the occupation as guided by the international law. A just ending to the occupation must address disputes regarding the borders for a viable two-state solution, the return of all Palestinian refugees, the status of East Jerusalem as the capital of the Palestinian state, and halting all illegal settlements. South Africa calls on all stakeholders to ensure that all obligations under the international law are met in order for a peaceful and a just ending of the occupation of Palestine. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The NFP.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The National Freedom Party notes with great concern, as seen on mainstream and other media platforms, the Department of Basic Education intends on introducing unisex toilets in school. The NFP further notes with concern that despite the failure of the Department of Basic Education to provide adequate sanitation facilities for our learners, many of whom continue to use pit toilets, some even die in these pit toilets that are provided by the department. The NFP further raises a concern about the poor quality of education resulting in 1 or 2 learners dropping out of school. Further notes that 60% of learners from basic education that go to TVET colleges drop out in the first year because of the poor quality of basic education level. The minister should focus on that. The introduction of unisex toilets will infringe.
Honorable Sheikh Imam, I think you've muted yourself. Honorable Sheikh Imam, if you are still on the platform, please unmute yourself and continue. No, it seems to me you have difficulty with the connection.
Not
with
infringe on the constitutional rights of
respect.
majority of the. Thank you.
Honorable Sheikh Imam, we unfortunately did not hear the last part of your member statement. I now recognize the ANC.
Okay.
The ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. We welcome the judgment delivered by the Pretoria High Court on Thursday, the 10th November 2022, in which the Trade Union Solidarity legal challenge to prevent the government from implementing the NHI failed. This follows an attempt by Solidarity to interdict the National Department of Health through an urgent court application from filling the advertised 44 vacancies as part of the effort by the department to establish a fully functioning NHI branch while the legislative process on NHI bill is underway. The union filed an urgent court application in the Pretoria High Court on the 12th of October 2022, interdicting the Department of Health from making appointments of competent technical specialists to the NHI branch to assist with the preparations for functioning of the NHI fund. The judge dismissed the application by the Solidarity Union with costs. The objective of the NHI is to provide universal access to quality and affordable healthcare for all South Africans, irrespective of their socioeconomic status, by ensuring that the use of health services does not result in financial hardship for individuals and their families. This progressive approach to health provision is the policy of the World Health Organization. NHI will be implemented in a progressive and responsible manner in our country. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you. The DA.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. On the 10th of September 2021, the Democratic Alliance applied to the Gauteng High Court to review and set aside the unlawful decision of Arthur Fraser, Zuma acolyte and then Commissioner of Correctional Services, to override the recommendation of the Medical Parole Board and release former President Zuma on medical parole. The High Court declared Mr. Zuma's medical parole unlawful and ordered his return to prison to serve the remainder of his sentence. The Department of Correctional Services, in an egregious waste of taxpayers' money, appealed this ruling unsuccessfully. Yesterday, the Supreme Court of Appeal unanimously upheld the decision of the Gauteng High Court, declaring the medical parole illegal and ordered Mr. Zuma to return to prison to serve the remainder of his sentence. This is another big rule of law.
Honourable members, order. Let's listen to the statement and not the background sounds.
Well,
There's
just
a dog on the loose.
Is it a
Continue,
pitbull?
Honourable Breitenbach.
This is another victory for the rule of law and the principles of equality before the law. And it has once again vindicated the DA in our fight to ensure that Mr. Zuma accounts for his crimes. The Department of Correctional Services must ensure that Mr. Zuma returns to prison immediately to serve the remainder of his sentence. I thank you.
Thank you. The EFF.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, we have an agency called the Cross-Border Road Transportation Agency that receives more than 38 million from the fiscus and collects more than 200 million permits issued, permit application fees and fines. We cannot allow this agency to have such a crucial mandate in the hands of people who do not have experience managing complex organizations. The Cross-Border Road Transportation Agency is run like a circus. The CEO confuses his family and friends' relationships with legislature. The place is a mess. The minister pretends like it's not happening, and he will wait for newspaper articles to start irritating us with oversight visits and forensic investigations. The CEO is firing people for nonsensical reasons instead of dealing with his own insecurities. And when all these people, win awards at the CCMA, we will make sure that he pays out of his pocket. How did Mohale Solutions get the 1.6 million contract to redesign the organization? Why was the contract cancelled? And at the same time, the company paid 750,000 for a contract that was being cancelled. Where did the file go? Why is Dr. Advocate Tsago, who is now the Judiciary Services Executive, forcing service providers who have contracts with the agency to appoint people? And when they refuse, she goes and claims poor performance. This is what happens when the CEO writes in his qualifications that he has a master's degree as a qualification, and in the same line writes that his decision is outstanding. What kind of qualification is that? We asked the minister all these questions as early as October 14th in this year, but he does not seem to need to respond. What must happen to Mr. Mbawula?
Honourable member,
questions. Thank you.
Your time is expired. Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The ANC-led government resolve to strengthen the criminal justice system to recover stolen public funds is slowly yielding expected results. This is evident with the Special Investigation Unit recovering of at least 300 million rands from a technical and vocational education and training college, money that was meant for students on the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. The SIU undertook the investigation about the money after President Cyril Ramaphosa signed a proclamation authorizing the Corruption Busting Unit to investigate the affairs of NSFAS. The Northlink College received over 33 million rands from NSFAS to be allocated to deserving students between 2017 and 2021. The money was invested without authorization instead of returning it to NEFSAS. The ANC is fully behind the SIU investigation on allegations of corruption and maladministration at NESFAS, as well as the recovery of any financial losses suffered by the state through corruption and negligence. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The PAC. The ANC.
PAC is not talking, Chair.
Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable
millions of
members,
South
may I
Africans
request
in
you, those
rural
around the
areas-
member there, you are disturbing that honorable member who's on the floor.
For millions of South Africans in rural areas, roads and bridges provides access to markets, employment opportunities, and social services. We therefore welcome the announcement that the Eastern Cape is set to receive a major economic boost with the appointment of a contractor to build a long-awaited maintained bridge, which forms part of the N2 Wild Coast Road project, as well as in the rehabilitation of the R56 from Matatiele to the east of the Cedarville project. The South African National Roads Agency Limited made the announcement last week after completing all procurement processes following the May 2022 cancellation of bids. In addition to these two projects, strategic roads such as the R61 from Magusheni to Mzamba, R58 Kala to Engobo, also known as Saturn's Neck, and the R11 from R411 from Kanduli to Coffee Bay have been awarded. An announcement will be made in due course about the N2 from Kwapaka, Mount Frere to Ekurhuleni River project. These two projects will bring the much needed socio-economic development to the province, providing job opportunities and address the triple challenges of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. The announcement of this critical road infrastructure project increases public sector investment in the province by almost 7 billion rand. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, honorable member. Honorable members, that concludes member statements. Are there any ministerial responses? Are there any ministerial responses? The Honorable Minister of Social Development, if I'm reading you correctly.
You are reading me correctly, Chair. I think basazophendula abanye other things mina nje bengifuna ukwazi ukuthi nje i-DA ngelinye ilanga kufuneka ke basichazele nje ukuthi yini le ngakuzuma yenza or angayenzanga ngelinye ilanga kodwa not namhlanje.
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Honorable Singh raised the Toga Tulip program.
Honorable members, let us give the member on the floor, the Honorable Minister, an opportunity to respond to the statements that you made. Please proceed.
Yes, I'm responding to the Toga Tulip program. One, just to give an indication that that matter is getting attention.
Please proceed, Honorable Minister.
Precisely for the same reasons the member is talking about. The impact of that is particularly on the emerging farmers, and the socio-economic impact on that area is what concerns us more. It's a matter which is getting attention. Some few cabinet colleagues are working on it. Thank you.
Are there any further ministerial responses? The Honorable Deputy Minister of Basic Education, followed by the Honorable Deputy Minister of Health.
Thank you, Sir, for Chair. Thank you, Chair. I heard the statements when I was coming. I had connected that there are pit toilets, and we are busy. We reported on several occasions in this house that the Department of Basic Education is busy in a project that is called SAFE, building those toilets that are not in good standards. There were 3,800 of those. We are only left with about 100, which we always say in this very same house that we are going to complete them during this financial year. So, and the new schools that we build, there are no pit toilets. We only experience challenges where the community, the entire community does not have water. So the toilets that we have built, which are waterborne, are not usable because the entire community doesn't have water. That is the only challenge that we experience, but we do put boreholes and tanks for the schools to have water. So, but the challenge that the entire community will come and get water from our schools. So it's just unfortunate that the honorable member is at home and he experienced this connection. I don't know if he does understand. And I'm happy that Honorable Hlengwa also hear me as I speak now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. His Excellency President Ramaphosa, his only state visit to United Kingdom started today. Part of his delegation is Minister Pashla. And part of the agenda items that will be tabled there is to look into the 70-year history of the national health system that is currently taking place in United Kingdom. They've had their own pitfalls, but they look at the success stories thereof. And that is why we are so much grateful about the honorable member's statement that talks to the universal health coverage as a system that we want to adopt in our country, a system that wants to say every South African, poor or rich, small or big, must also have access to quality health care. Now, that is a program that we are involved in, and we are very happy that every South African, in fact, it started, we received this bill when I was still a chairperson of the portfolio committee. We went right through the whole country getting views of South Africans. Majority of South Africans were asking us, you should have implemented this as of yesterday. And it actually talks to South Africans who are here in this house to say, I have a privilege as a member of parliament, I earn, but I also get a huge subsidy support for my medical aid. I don't care what happens to my domestic worker and to my gardener. It will change that picture so that all of us as South Africans, whether a gardener or a tea girl and a boss, you will be sitting in the same bed and be looked after and be supported too. So we are pushing very strongly that the NHI will actually move in there. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. Honorable members, I will now call on the following members of the executive on the virtual platform. And my apologies to them. There's been a technical problem here to get the indication that they want to respond to the statements that has been made. It will be in the following order. The Honorable Minister of Public Enterprises, followed by the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and then the Honorable Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. The Honorable Minister of Public Enterprises.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, and good afternoon to my colleagues. I want to respond together with Minister Creasy on the statement by the leader of the ACDP, Reverend Mishwe, and indicate the following, which Minister Creasy will add to from her experience at COP27. Firstly, that I think we need to all accept that climate change is a reality, it's arrived, it's impacting on people both in South Africa and elsewhere in the world. And we should do everything possible to ensure that we keep to the emissions commitments that we have made at COP26 and during the Paris Agreement itself. Secondly, as far as the construction of coal-powered stations are concerned, there very few financial institutions, if any, will support the financing of coal-powered stations. Thirdly, there are stations that have reached their sell-by date, so to speak. They are more than 50 years old within the Eskom fleet. And the first of those, Komati, has become a world leader project in terms of the implementation of the just energy transition. And Minister Creasy will explain, I'm sure, the kind of attention that the investment plan from South Africa attracted at COP27 itself. So South Africa will not be dictated by Western leaders. I think every country in the world has had to make some kind of adjustments in view of the war that's taking place in Europe to their energy sources and energy requirements. And it's brought a bit of reality home to Western leaders as well, particularly in Europe. And hopefully that helps us to work in a more cooperative way with these countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson and honorable members. Thank you very much from Honorable Esim for the question that he's raised, rather a statement in respect of Tongaat. Minister of Finance have already responded in part to this matter. I just want to indicate that as government, particularly the various ministers, Minister of Finance, DTIC and Agriculture are engaged and have been engaging all stakeholders within the sugar industry, particularly those that are going to be affected severely by the challenges experienced at Tongaat Hulett. It's important for us to appreciate that currently the company is under business rescue, and we therefore need to give that process a chance to be able to do what it needs to do in trying to rescue that business. And I must say that we were really heartened that the business rescue practitioners decided in their wisdom that they would pay the small scale farmers first, particularly those who had already delivered their sugar in the mills. However, it's important to also appreciate that there were certain decisions that unfortunately had put Tongaat Hulett in the situation that it is, together with the industry at large in that province. Therefore, as we try to look at what we need to do, it is important also to appreciate that in future, our companies must be able to conduct their business in a manner that it does not, at a particular point in time, brings them into such a situation where a number of industries downstream and upstream get affected by that. But I want to assure you, Honorable Singh and members, and in particular, our small scale growers and other growers in the KZN province and the workers, that we are doing everything possible to make sure that the province, particularly that industry, is not severely impacted upon. Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I now recognize the Honourable Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment.
Thank you very much, Honourable House Chair. And just to build on what Minister Pravin Gordhan said, the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan that was shared with the international partners at COP27 is a South African-led, South African-developed plan based on two principles. The first is that our energy transition will be at a pace that our country can afford and will ensure that it promotes energy security. Secondly, workers and vulnerable communities, particularly those in the Mpumalanga coal belt, will be central to deciding the repurposing of coal-fired power stations and the development of other industries in the Mpumalanga value chain, so that new forms of employment are created and no one is left behind. One of the questions I personally asked the European Union when I was at COP27 was whether it is true that they are going back to coal. The International Energy Agency gives us the following statistics. Yes, there is going to be a 7% increase in the use of coal in the European energy mix this winter because Russian gas is too expensive. Secondly, the European Union this year will continue to decrease their carbon emissions in line with their nationally determined contributions that were submitted by their member countries last year. Thirdly, while the crisis is providing a short-term boost to coal, the long-term gain is in renewables and in atomic energy, with 50 gigawatts of renewable energy due to come on stream next year. South Africa has to join in the global technology shift to greener types of production and energy generation if we don't want to be affected by carbon border tariffs that will affect all of our goods and services in the future if we don't develop these new industries. Thank you very much, Honourable House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, that concludes ministerial responses. The Secretary will read the first order.
Consideration of report of Standing Committee on Finance on General Laws
Anti-Money Laundering and Combating Terrorism Financing Amendment Bill.
I now recognize the Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Welcome back from COP27. I move the report be adopted. Thank you.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Chairperson, please note the objection of the DA.
Objection is noted. Are there any further objections?
Yes, please note the objection of the FF plus.
It's noted.
ACDP as well.
ACDP, Honorable Paulson.
Then try to call it a
No, that has nothing to do with our business. Just mute the microphone of the honorable member who has inadvertently got onto the platform. Honorable Paulson? The EFF also objects. Are there any further objections? With those objections, the report is agreed to. The secretary will read the second order.
Second reading debate, general laws, anti-money laundering and combating terrorism financing amendment bill.
I now recognize the Honorable Minister of Finance.
House chairpersons, colleagues, ministers and deputy ministers, honorable members. Today marks a significant milestone in actions taken by South Africa to address deficiencies identified in the country's ability to deal with money laundering and financing of terrorism by the Financial Action Task Force and the risk of grey listing. By passing the General Laws Anti-Laundering and Combating of Financing of Terrorism Amendment Bill and the coming Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorist and Related Activities Amendment Bill, this House demonstrates its commitment to not only addressing the issues which risk grey listing by FATA, but more importantly, this government's commitment to rooting out and preventing financial crime and the proceeds of corruption. The bill amends 5 pieces of legislation to certify the technical compliance deficiencies relating to the adequacy of laws and legal frameworks related to the 40 FATF recommendations that we identified in the mutual evaluation report. These technical compliance deficiencies represent 1/2 of the exam we must pass. They are about those few legislations which encompasses other departments. The amendment bill addresses deficiencies in at least 14 of the 20 recommendations, including an appropriate enhancement of powers, procedures for regulatory authorities. In parallel, the protection of constitutional democracy against terrorism and related activities bill 2022, which is administered by the Minister of Police, is currently before Parliament. I hope it will be passed soon. We enacted 2 laws. It will, when enacted into law, it will improve South Africa's adherence to international best practice in combating financial crimes and corruption, and stand as the strongest possible evidence of this House's commitment to fighting financial corruption. Honorable members, the National Assembly will now consider the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and will vote on the bill with the amendment proposed by the Standing Committee on Finance in its report. If the National Assembly adopts this bill with the proposed amendment, the National Council of Provinces and the Select Committee on Finance in the NSOP will then consider the bill. In addition to the laws we are passing, the country is also working to improve the effectiveness of the country's anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism system. This represents the second half of the exam we must pass. This relates to how the country's anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism laws are implemented and how effective the country's systems are in combating financial crime. Here, I, along with the
Director General have been mandated by Cabinet to ensure coordination across departments, agencies, and authorities through an interdepartmental process. I believe that through this interdepartmental committee on anti-money laundering, we've made the significant progress in improving effectiveness, as well as the legislative changes the FATF needs to see for us to pass this exam and avoid grey listing. The key areas of work of the Interdepartmental Committee include development of a national risk assessment and strategy to combat financial crime, improve the intensity of supervision of sectors vulnerable to facilitating financial crimes, demonstrating improvements in investigating and prosecuting financial crimes, improving the availability of beneficial ownership information, enhancing our asset recovery mechanism, implementation of targeted financial sanctions for terrorism activity, and proliferation financing, as well as deepened cooperation domestically and international to bring those responsible for financial crime and corruption to book. I would like to conclude by thanking my cabinet colleagues whose departments have been so instrumental in passing this bill and reaching this milestone. I would also like to thank members of this House, and especially the members and chair of the Standing Committee on Finance, who have worked diligently to conduct hearings, engage stakeholders, and process the bill before this House. Avoiding a potential grey listing is not the responsibility of a single department or government. It is a collective responsibility. I'm glad to see that we're collectively working towards our shared goals. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize the Honorable Mashwanganyi. The Honorable Abram will make the intervention on behalf of the Honorable Member. Honorable Abram.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair of Chairs. Our chairperson is on the way. Introduction and background. On the 31st August 2022, the Standing Committee on Finance was briefed by the National Treasury and the FIC on the general laws, anti-money laundering and combating of terrorism financing. The GLAB 2022 is an omnibus aimed at amending various pieces of legislation to address deficiencies related to combating money laundering and terrorism financing and bring South Africa into compliance with the global standards set by the Financial Action Task Force, briefly named FATF, the global regulator of anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. South Africa, as the minister has indicated, is a member of FATF, which in 2019 conducted a peer review and produced a mutual evaluation report in October 2019. On the country's implementation of FATF, out of 40 recommendations of FATF, South Africa rated poorly and was found to have complied with only 20 of the 40 FATF standards.
Honorable members. Honorable members, let's listen to the Honorable Abraham.
Okay. FATF also measured the effectiveness of the implementation of its standards by South Africa and found this had not yielded the intended outcomes on all the 11 immediate outcomes that it examines. These 11 outcomes can be described as follows. There are immediate outcomes, which are risk, policy, and coordination. And there's immediate outcome, which is international cooperation. And there's immediate outcome 3, which is supervision. And there's immediate outcome 4, which is preventive measures. And 5, it's legal persons and arrangements. 6, it's financial intelligence on money laundering and terrorism financing. 7, it's money laundering investigations. And 8 is confiscation. 9, terrorism financing investigations and prosecutions. And 10 is terrorism financing preventive measures and financial sanctions. And outcome 11 is proliferation financing sanctions. As a result of these findings by the EMR 2019, South Africa was placed under International Cooperation Review Group observation for a period of a year. This observation ended in October 2022, where South Africa submitted reports on technical compliance and effectiveness outcomes. This gave South Africa a chance to rectify the deficiencies identified during the peer review process. In February 2023, South Africa's performance in rectifying its deficiencies will be considered at the FATF plenary meeting, whereby FATF will decide whether to place South Africa on a gray list of countries that need continued monitoring and observation or not. During a briefing and deliberations by the committee, the National Treasury and FIC assured that significant progress was being made in addressing the South Africa's technical compliance issues raised by FATF in the 2019 MER. They explained that technical compliance basically refers to the adequacy of the country's AML, CFT laws and regulatory framework. Technical compliance deficiencies mean that the country must amend its laws or introduce new provisions so that the country's legal and regulatory framework complies with FATF standards. The National Treasury and FIC, however, stated that while it would seem easy to rectify the technical compliance deficiencies, achieving the 11 effectiveness measures would be difficult as they depended on the actions of many other role players, such as police, the AFU, and the prosecution authorities, not the National Treasury and FIC alone. In terms of public participation, Chair of Chairs, the committee was briefed on the bill by the National Treasury and the FIC on the 31st August 2022 and held public hearings on the 11th of October. The comment period was subsequently unanimously extended by the committee to the 25th of October 2022, following from most commentators raising concern about the short period that was allowed for the public to comment on the bill. A combined total of 59 public submissions were received during the public participation process. National Treasury requested the presidency to exempt the draft bill from the application of SIAs due to urgency to address some of the deficiencies to avoid grey listing by the Financial Action Task Force, FATF. And because such grey listing may result in the financial institutions abroad limiting transactions with South Africa and its financial institutions. Following this request and the submission of the completed SIA's significant test template, the presidency on 26 July 2022 exempted the application of the SIAs to the draft bill. Committee observations and recommendations. The committee notes the interest by the public in the bill. This is shown in the number of comments received from the public. The committee notes that the bill was processed under tight deadlines, especially with threats of South Africa facing a grey listing by FATF. The committee has previously made it clear that our country cannot afford a grey listing by FATF, as that might have a negative impact on the trade and economy. Although grey listing by FATF does not necessarily mean that countries must not deal with a particular country. I'm sorry. The mere naming and shaming exercise by FATF could lead to the severe and adverse economic consequences for trade and transactions with other countries. I'm sorry, Chair. Can I? As the Minister observed in his letter to the committee dated 3rd November 2022. However, Chair, the committee believes that the legislation of this nature cannot be pushed through without adequate public participation. The committee believes that a socio-economic impact assessment study should have been conducted to evaluate the costs and benefits of the changes proposed by the bill. The committee, however, does not encourage the processing of legislation in this fashion, but understands the urgency of preventing South Africa from being grey-listed by FATF by February 2023. The committee will also monitor closely the implementation of this bill through regular briefings by the National Treasury and the FIC and other related parties. The committee notes the general concerns raised by religious organizations and persons and general NPO community to the onerous provisions of this bill. House Chair, I move for the adoption of this report. Nda cancer, as the chairperson would say.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable George.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Order, Honorable Members.
South Africa is not helping to combat the global problem of money laundering, terrorist financing, and the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. The Financial Action Task Force, FATF, established international standards for measures that countries should have in place within their criminal justice and financial regulatory systems. A country that is not compliant is grey-listed and considered a risk to the global financial system. After its visit in 2019, FATF reported that understanding of terrorist financing was underdeveloped and risks were not being adequately addressed. That state capture had generated substantial corruption proceeds and undermined key agencies with roles to combat such activity. That law enforcement agencies lack the skills and resources to proactively investigate.
Honorable George, will we just mute the Honorable Deputy Chief Whip of the ANC? It seems to me a microphone is on. Please continue, Honorable Member.
That detecting undeclared cross-border movements of cash needed improving and implementing United Nations Security Council resolutions for terrorist financing had not occurred since 2017. South Africa failed in 20 of the 40 FATF recommendations in terms of technical compliance and failed in all 11 effectiveness measures. Government did nothing, most likely because the hopelessly corrupt administration is guilty of the crimes that FATF seeks to fight. Money laundering in particular. The president himself appears to have moved an enormous amount of cash illicitly across the border, and it is well known that corrupt activity has drained billions from the public financial system. IntelliDex research places the probability of a FATF grey listing in February at 85%. They predict an immediate increase in the cost of international trade and cost to South African banks in managing international banking relationships and relationships with global management systems providers. Foreign counterparts may opt to reduce their compliance cost by terminating relationships with South African clients and not entering into new relationships. Grey listing will generate negative sentiment and ultimately result in a reduced appetite for business relationships with South African associates. Other grey listed countries include Albania, Haiti, Myanmar, Pakistan, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. IntelliDex estimates that between 1% and 3% of GDP will be lost from higher costs, depending on how South Africa's progress in addressing FATF concerns is perceived and how quickly we can exit the grey list. When government eventually woke up to the reality of grey listing, it scrambled to amend various laws, and that bill is on the table before us. We support amendments that require the identification of beneficial owners and trustees, identify politically influential persons, strengthen the Financial Intelligence Center, and enforce resolutions of the United Nations Security Council regarding sanctions. We do not support an amendment to the Non-Profit Organizations Act that requires the registration of non-profit organizations that receive money from or send money to foreign sources. Government does not value civil society organizations and has long wanted to control their activities. The location of a non-profit organizations directorate within the Department of Social Development to register these organizations is unworkable, considering that this dysfunctional department cannot even deliver on its current mandate to pay social grants to vulnerable South Africans. The impact on relief and religious organizations has not been properly considered. Nobody wants a grey listing. The consequences for our already battered economy will be significant. We cannot, however, be blackmailed into legislation that is unworkable. There was more than enough time for legislation to be sensibly amended. That time was wasted. And here we are on the eve of a grey listing with legislation we cannot support. There is no guarantee that passing this legislation will be enough to satisfy FATF. The fundamental problem lies with the prosecution of perpetrators of these financial crimes. And no amount of legislation can fix systemic corruption or generate political will to act. If we are grey listed, this will be yet another failure of an incapable state, ignoring the growing cost of living crisis, where 81% of households cannot put enough food on the table. The ANC government is getting in the way of South Africa's economic growth and prosperity at the expense of the poorest members of our society. In 2024, the people will let you know how they feel about it. We will not support this bill. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Paulson.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chairperson, South Africa has been a hub of international money laundering and terrorism financing for many years because the government did not understand the complexities of illicit financial flows, base erosion, and profit shifting. It became clear that some in the governing party had not even heard of the phenomena when the EFF raised the matter during a SONA debate in 2014. When the EFF made its submission to the Davis Tax Committee in 2016, we presented evidence from credible sources to demonstrate that South Africa and the African continent were losing billions of dollars in revenues through illicit financial flows, base erosion, and profit shifting. Africa alone loses more than 750 billion rand every year. South Africa loses under 90 billion rand every year. That is enough to fund free, quality, decolonized education. We know that those in the benches of the governing party are not interested in fixing this crisis because they are part of the problem. They know that the millions of dollars found in the mattresses and sofas of the president are part and parcel of illicit financial flows. The president of the country is involved in illicit financial flow. There are dollars stolen from his house that SARS and the Reserve Bank are not aware of, but these are dollars that are in the country. House Chairperson, if the basis of the bill is that we must tighten the anti-money laundering and combating terrorism financing laws because we are now part of the IMF, the Eastern and Southern African Anti-Money Laundering Group, and the Financial Action Task Force, it is extremely misguided. The reality is that we are not going to resolve money laundering and the financing of terrorism unless we can deal decisively with illicit financial flows, base erosion, and profit shifting. We have to first admit that almost all companies in all sectors are involved in illicit financial flows, base erosion, and profit shifting. Some people used to think that this was only happening in the mining sector. It is happening in all sectors, in agriculture, in telecommunication, in construction, and it is facilitated by the financial sector. They even advertise it on their websites. The South African Reserve Bank has failed to build capacity despite evidence since 2014. People are able to bring dollar bills and deliver them to Bala Bala in trucks without their knowledge. The South African Revenue Service has spent the last 5 years dealing with cosmetic changes and payments of reparations to members of the rogue unit. The Financial Intelligence Center operates like some units in the National Treasury, and it is not accessible to the public or even members of the public sector. We have written to the Financial Intelligence Center on numerous occasions to report matters and request investigations, but our correspondence is ignored. And when investigations are conducted and given to the police, there is no prosecution. The amendment in the bill ignores the elephant in the room. We need decisive, coherent, and clear legislation, starting with legislation to deal harshly with illicit financial flows. We still need a central agency that coordinates SARS, the Reserve Bank, FIC, and the Hawks with independent administration. At some point, we must pass legislation to establish a coordinating body. We need legislation that puts harsh penalties in place for multinational companies that are engaged in profit shifting and base erosion, and thus must be treated as a crime. We must expropriate these companies without compensation. More fundamentally, we must change the legislation to clearly demonstrate where tax planning ends and where the criminality of multinational companies starts. But we will not resolve problems of money laundering and combating terrorism financing, which remains a sub-area of broader illicit financial flow activities, which clearly the prevention and combating of corruption activities is failing to deal with. In closing, Chairperson, we maintain that the presidency must institute a judicial commission of inquiry in terms of Section 84 of the Constitution to look specifically into the illicit financial flows since 1994. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Buthelezi.
Ngiyavuma kakhulu. Sihlalo ohloniphekileyo. Thina njengeNingizimu Afrika siyayiqhenya ngokuba ngelile amazwe nomthethosisekelo ohlonishwa umhlaba wonke. Kodwa ukuthi umthethosisekelo nohlonishwa kangaka unomthelela ongakanani ekushintsheni impilo zabantu, umbuzo omkhulu fanele basibuze wona sonke. Sinemthethwana futhi yonke emihle ney'nqubo zikahulumeni ezinhle, kodwa ukuthi ziyalandelezwa bese ekugcineni udaba lolo futhi olungumbuzo omkhulu. Izwe lethu liye lashaywa yizembe elikhulu, iy'khathi ey'ningi liphoswa kwavobo abaqala umnotho wamazwe omhlaba. Phakathi kwezinye zey'zathu kwaba kwehlika kwethu njengezwe ukuyibophezela kulokho ezibonele ngakho nokugcina imitheshwana yethu esiyishayayo. Ngendlela efana kwehlala namhlanje, lo mbiko wekomiti omthethosivivinywa ohloswe ngawo ukulwisana nokuthutshelisa kwey'nkece nophinde futhi ulwisane nomsebenzi wokuphekula ikhuni. Ungobaluleke kakhulu basiwuphothule nanjengoba izwe lethu lilengelwa izembe futhi lokuba ligreliswe balibeke endaweni ebucayi. Ngakho-ke kumqoka ukuthi empini yethu ebhekiswe ezenzweni zokuphekula ikhuni kanye nasezenzweni zokuthutsheliswa kwey'nkece, siqaphele ukuthi yonke imitheshwana esiyishayayo ayisinikezi imiphumela esingayihlosile, ikakhulukazi labo abangasiyona ingozi nababuthaka. Futhi kufanele basikhumbule ukuthi yonke imitheshwana esiyishayayo ayihlukumezi labo abahwebayo, ikakhulukazi ngaphandle kwey'nkambiso ey'hlelekile. Iqiniso ngelithi baningi kakhulu abantu bakithi abayithola beyizisulu besolwa ngezinye zey'nhlaka njengamabhenki, njengokuthi bangabantu abayingxenye yokuphekula ikhuni. Uma benje ngasemabhenki babizwa umbuzo ebehlisa iy'thunzi, abanye kuze kuvalwe ama-account abo ngoba nje besolwa kungalali nendlela efaneleyo ukwenza lokho. Kanti ngolunye uhlangothi imibuzo efanayo ayiphoswa kulabo abayizizathu zokuthwelisa iy'mali kanye nabazimbandakanya ngqo endabeni zokuphekula ikhuni. Ngakho-ke sihlalo siyavumelana nombiko othini ukuthi siyazazi indawo kufanele baziqashwe ngamehlokhozi nokufanele basibuke kuzo njengezwe. Kodwa iqiniso lithi uma senza lokhu asiqaphelisise sihambe ngonyawo lonwabo. Kuyishwa-ke isihlalo ehloniphileyo ukuthi kube ney'nsolo ezimbi zalolu hlobo nesusana nazo olubhekiswe kubantu abamqoka nabakhulu esifana nokubabiza ngamagama abayingxenye yalendlu nabathenjwe yizwe ukuba belisane nezehlakalo ey'fuze lezi. Lokhu-ke kwehlisa amandla nomdlandla kulabo abayingxenye intando enhle, bese kuthi yonke imizamo esiyenzayo bengathi ihlose ukuqondiswa kwabathile hhayi abathile. Ukuze-ke sihlale silwisana le nkinga sidinga ukuba sibe qotho futhi sithembeke kho konke esikwenzayo. Uma nxa kutholakala abayimbaleki lezi zenzo zenkohlakalo, izenzo zokuphekula ikhuni, bashushiswe baphenywe, abafumana benamacala babekwe endaweni efaneleyo. Ngakho iqembu lentando enhle abantu i-IFP iyawaseka lo mbiko. Ngiyathokoza.
Thank you, honorable member. The next speaker is the honorable Vessels.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. House Chairperson, we all can agree that grey listing will have severe and adverse economic consequences for trade and transactions with other countries, as the Minister pointed out. This will further be detrimental to investor confidence and will cause further economic hardships. As the Honorable Abrams put it, South Africa can't afford being grey listed. But Chairperson, this cannot mean that it is justified to make bad laws and to rush a legislative process just to avoid grey listing. There are many provisions in this bill which will have detrimental consequences, unforeseen consequences, and has not been adequately considered. The executive, as per usual, Chairperson, was fast asleep. And then they were shocked at the possibility of being grey listed, as per usual, shocked. Then they scrambled to get this bill drafted. The executive, as per usual, steamrolled the process and undermined the legislative process and the legislature, regarding this parliament once again as a rubber stamp. The legislation is rushed, ill-considered, and will have unintended detrimental consequences, especially for NGOs. And who, Chairperson, will suffer the most? The poor. So the poor will suffer the most, whilst the fat cat friends of the ANC will continue to launder money. Because it doesn't mean what legislation is in place, this government can't police it. This government can't enact it. This government fails. You have the best legislation on municipal level, best in the world. What happens? What's the worst off in South Africa? Municipalities. Why? Failure of the MFMA? Not. Failure by the ANC. Once again, the fat cats will get richer, whilst the poor will suffer. Those who try to comply with legislation, you will make it impossible to do business and serve the people. NGOs will suffer, businesses will suffer because of this compliance matters that have not been considered fully. And then there is no policing thereof. Die agbare George is reg, dat die implementeringsprobleem is die grootste in Suid-Afrika. Die polisieering van wetgewing is die probleem. En jy weet wat, dan skree u hier en gaan te kere oor dit is dit en dit is dat. Die feit van die saak is, u val die mense daar buite. Want u val die
Punt van orde, voorsitter.
beginsel.
Yes, honorable member, what is the point of order?
Voorsitter, ek wil net weet, is dit parlementêr vir hierdie man om vir ons met die agbare om ons met vingers te wys die hele tyd wanneer hy praat?
Yeah, please address the chairperson, honorable member. Please continue.
Baie dankie, voorsitter, was die handskoen pas, trek hom aan. En die feit van die saak is, voorsitter, dat die probleem hier is dat u nie in die belang van die mense optree of in belang van die grondwetlike demokrasie nie. Die Zondo-kommissie wys duidelik die mislukkings van die ANC-meerderheid in hierdie huis. Hoeveel wetgewing word deur gestoomroller in hierdie huis en dan word dit suksesvol in die grondwethof verslaan. U doen nou weer dieselfde. U wil nie luister na die oppositie nie. Hierdie wetgewing gaan weer eens in die grondwethof draai, maar u wil nie luister. U wil nie luister dat hierdie grondwet van ons, waarop u trots is, sê 'n skeiding van magte en respek vir die wetgewer. Wat doen die adjunkt-president verlede week? Hy sê ministers mag maar nie hier wees nie, want dit bots met die kabinet. Jy weet wat? U is besig om die mense te misluk, want u neem nie hierdie parlement ernstig op nie, en hierdie wet is 'n bewys daarvan. Ek dankie.
Thank you, honorable member. The next speaker is the honorable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP appreciates the hugely negative impact that grey listing will have on financial institutions in the country and indeed businesses and the economy as a whole. Business leadership estimated the impact on the country's GDP at anywhere between 1% to 3%. And this in an environment of constrained economic growth the country can ill afford. However, the ACDP must express its displeasure at the haste with which this bill had to be dealt with, considering its far-reaching implications, particularly for the NPO sector. We also expressed our deep concerns that the bill, as initially drafted, Honourable Minister, would require every NPO, from sewing clubs to knitting clubs to choirs, all churches, faith-based organizations, to register with the Department of Social Development. And we expressed our doubts as to whether social development would cope, as it is estimated that there are approximately 150,000 NPOs. Now, we appreciate and we are grateful that National Treasury has since amended the bill to require only those NPOs, including churches which make donations outside the country or provide humanitarian, charitable, religious, educational, or cultural services beyond the country's borders. Those NPOs will need to register. However, our concern is still that every church, every small church that sends a missionary will now be compelled to register with the department, irrespective, Honourable Minister, of whether they are already registered as a non-profit company with CIPC, SARS as a public benefit organization, or the Master's Office as charitable trusts. Now, Honourable Minister, it's very careful to read footnote to paragraph 6B1 of the FATF recommendations 8. It states that specific licensing or registration requirements for counterterrorism financing is unnecessary for NPOs that are already registered with tax authorities and already monitored. And that's why the ACDP raised this issue during our discussion and said, is it not sufficient if an NPO is already registered? And there were arguments that it is not sufficient, as one would want to look at the constitutions of the various organizations. Now, we hold severe objections at this stage. We do believe that there are other methods of dealing with this issue, particularly given the role that civil society plays in society. And these administrative burdens will severely impact religious organizations, civil societies across the board. And we do believe that a more practical approach would be to look at this issue and to look at-risk NPOs, register those which could be narrowly defined as those that provide money or services to specific entities as identified by the UN Security Council as per Section 25 of the POC Act. Minister, have a look at that. Possibly this is the answer. Regrettably, the ACDP will not support this bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Sheikh Imam. The Honourable Sheikh Imam. We'll proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Chairperson, just had a problem with my system. Yeah, let me start off by my raising concerns about this particular bill, Chairperson, but let me start off by saying, when we talk about terrorism, where does terrorism come from? Why are we today faced with this bill? What has given rise to this? In my understanding, you get two types of terrorism. First of all, it is those states that create terrorism or terrorists, who fund them, who take away what does not belong to you, who want what does not belong to you, create chaos and mayhem. Then on the other hand, you have terrorists that are created. They are not born terrorists. They want to protect their own rights that are being violated by other states and others. So this is where it actually comes from. I note that this was done in extreme hurry, and I wish we could apply this on many other bills that we need to do. Illicit financial flows in this country has been going on, Chairperson, for decades. Particularly big business or multinationals. We know through the offshore businesses that they have, how they take out money out of this country, but very little or nothing seems to have been done about that. Now look at the impact, Chairperson, that this is going to have. And I think my understanding is this is another measure that is being put in place to control institutions, organizations, NGOs, NPOs, and civil society organizations. Look at the measures that are going to be put and the impact on these NGOs and NPOs that is being put. So really, we think that there is something untoward. Look at the pressure that comes from the international community. These are the people who are threatening us with grey listing should we not be able to meet the deadlines. And that put us under tremendous pressure, to be able to meet the deadlines that we're talking about. They talk about how it's going to affect the economy, how it's going to affect your GDP. But all this, Chairperson, is to put control measures to remote control us all over the world. The National Freedom Party will not support this. We do not believe that it is the best interest, particularly of many institutions that are going to suffer the consequences thereof. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chair, let me congratulate Qatar for an amazing start to the Soccer World Cup. And it was proud that we saw the 2010 soccer ball with South Africa's name on it. The general laws, anti-money laundering and combating terrorism financial bill shames freedom fighters like President Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Chief Albert Tulio, Robert Bukwe, and Imam Abdullah Harun. When I met the former Speaker of the Austrian Parliament, he told me about a bag of money that he gave to President Mandela. Nothing is done about the illicit financial flows, and we've heard the EFF explain it very well. Because of deals struck to get our freedom, nearly every mining company steals money from our GDP and the poor. Up to now, Parliament does not make the cut to reduce IFF, which runs into billions and can pay for the diesel we need now. The minister jumps to serve the IFF, the World Bank, the West, and America. And I think when you look at this bill, he's asking them, how high must I jump? Other ministers must follow the example of the Minister of Public Enterprises, which earlier on indicated that he does not jump. Brother Colonel Muammar Gaddafi never listened to the West in Libya's early years. He was never worried about grey listing. So like I said, South Africa jumps. So Aldama asks, who are terrorists? It is not the several Western countries that invade and kill billions of people. This bill is a ja-baas, nee-baas bill. Al-Jamaa will not support this bill. The chair of the Portfolio Committee must not apologize to NGOs. She must listen to them. We are very concerned, like the ACDP raised, that this bill will dilute the freedoms that we have fought so hard for. Like I said earlier on, we reject this bill. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Madisha.
Honourable Chair, Rusabagina was correct when he said the dancers have changed, but the music remains the same. He said, because although the French oppressors had given the ruling power back to Rwandans, those who took power went to oppress people and terrorize them for more than 28 years. South Africa continues to experience the same form of music, terrorism, as the people of Rwanda did. New dancers here in South Africa who chose to be called revolutionaries and democrats are enjoying the apartheid music. Apartheid musicians emerged with the music of terrorism, to which they danced as they killed people using chains, bullets, and deaths. Terrorism by today's government is worse. Today's dancers use money laundering and corruption, which is a form of terrorism. Genuine companies are denied tenders unless they commit to pay or give the terrorists kickbacks. Public servants are not given a living wage. That is why they are out there, for example, on strike, and they must be paid. The so-called cater deployment to promote corruption and open stealing of public money is continuing because of this ANC government. Public procurement systems, monitoring systems that were tabled and passed by this parliament are ignored. Therefore, for as long as this ANC government is there, we are not going anywhere, dear people of South Africa. And therefore, we must not support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order, Honorable Members. The next speaker is the Honorable Sarupin.
Thank you very much, House Chair. The United Nations Security Council in July this year raised the alarm that South Africa had become a significant site for facilitating financial transfers to terrorist organizations, including the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, known as ISIL or more colloquially as ISIS. In March this year, the United States placed sanctions on 4 people in South Africa for supporting and financing terrorist activities across the continent. One of these persons was sanctioned for raising funds for kidnapping and extortion. He has never faced criminal charges domestically because the prosecuting authority messed up the file. Now, these activities are happening not because of lapses in our existing system, but because the government refuses to acknowledge that it is happening. In February this year, the Financial Intelligence Center, the FIC, reported to this parliament that the government's failure to even acknowledge that terrorist financing is happening prevents them from taking action. To quote the FIC, their exact words are, "This indirectly impacts on their ability to investigate and prosecute potential terrorist financing, including to identify financing networks and other financing activities. South Africa has failed to demonstrate that it is effectively identifying the specific roles played by terrorist financiers," close quote. It is therefore unsurprising that we are facing potential grey listing by the Financial Action Task Force, because since 2017, this government has failed to implement UN Security Council resolutions to deal with terrorist financing. Now, this parliament is scrambling and we're scurrying to deal with rushed omnibus legislation to fix it, because the proverbial government ostrich has finally pulled its head out of the sand to see that a bullet train is about to hit it. The economic consequences of grey listing will be dire. Now, there are various provisions in this omnibus legislation that are essential, but unfortunately, the government has decided to try to use this legislation as a backdoor to register and eventually control NPOs. And this has been an ideological goal of the ANC in this parliament since 1997, when such a measure was first introduced and had to be dropped. The government couldn't get it right then, so they're taking the opportunity to target the NPO sector now, rather than deal with the actual crisis. So this legislation is rushed because the government has wasted years, and it doesn't necessarily address all the core issues as to why South Africa is a safe haven for terrorist financing. And the real problem sits with the prosecution of persons engaged in these activities. And the government fails to do so because of ineptitude and corruption. You cannot legislate competence into being. The DA cannot be blackmailed into accepting half measures on this very serious matter, and so we will not support this legislation. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Moralong.
Honorable House Chair, the ANC's policy orientation of building a more equitable global order, of working towards greater progress and development, is at the same time contested by specific risks and threats to our national interests. Threats to the country's economic development are just not narrowly located in the lack of economic growth and development, but rather these threats are linked to specific risks that have been generated by global networks and syndicates, consciously seeking to extract from our economy that which is not due to them through corrupt and nefarious methods. Few in this debate will have the integrity to acknowledge that it was precisely ANC policy that brought about reorientation in the financial sector in response to the identified and perceived threats which lie embedded in our financial sector, our property sector, and broader society, where funds become conduits for money laundering and financing of terrorism. Grey listing is an economic sanction that the Financial Action Task Force applies on its members when it believes a member country is not adhering to specific standards. Like all economic sanctions, it is undesirable, raises the risk profile of the country, has a negative effect on investment, makes it more expensive to raise international capital, and higher the costs that are exerted onto the financial sector, limiting transactions in the financial sector, and for companies, or in extreme circumstances, financial institutions abroad, saving or limiting transaction within South African financial institutions. The cost of all these get passed on to consumers in an incremental way, contributing to the rise in the cost of living. The combating of money laundering and terrorism financing is covered by such law, codes and agreements, the global standards set by the Financial Action Task Force. It is common cause that the 2019 Mutual Evaluation Report found that of the 40 standards against which money laundering and terrorism financing can be measured, South Africa was found to have complied with only 20. Whilst this narrative that has been driven by many in the opposition parties and some in business that we are going to be gray listed, their actual desire is that we don't get gray listed. But this process is a useful occasion to attack the ANC government. So let us talk about the counter narrative. The technical compliance refers to the adequacy of the country's laws and regulatory framework. Of the 20 standards, you have achieved 9 of these so far, whilst achieving the 11 effective measures would be difficult as they are dependent on the actions of many other players. South Africa submitted reports on technical compliance and effectiveness outcomes already. And in January, discussion with the Financial Action Task Force will take place on progress around the 20 standards. Clearly, what the task force is looking for is the spirit and intention of addressing the required standards. And with this omnibus amendment bill before us today, all of the other areas will be in law covered, while the practice to effectively deal with the standards is a process. The binary of this debate is gray listing or no gray listing. It is not as simplistic as each outstanding standard is assessed in terms of how much progress has been made and where due course can be shown that there is no progress. Even if there's no full compliance, this does not mean automatic lead to gray listing, but options can be negotiated towards full compliance. Technical compliance deficiencies mean that the country must amend its laws or introduce new provisions so that the country's legal and regulatory framework complies with the Financial Action Task Force standards. And this is what we have done with the General Laws Amendment Bill. The General Laws Amendment Bill is an omnibus bill aimed at amending 5 pieces of legislation to address deficiencies related to combating money laundering and terrorism financing and bring South Africa into compliance with global standards. A 6th piece of legislation, Protection of Constitutional Democracy Amendment Bill, is currently before the Portfolio Committee on Police. We have certainly dealt with concerns that have been raised during the public participation process. These include getting the rationale of Cabinet to provide the National Treasury exemption from socio-economic impact assessment based on agency. On the Non-Profit Organization Act, many submissions opposed the compulsory and blanket requirement for all non-profit organizations to register. And we have amended the bill to focus on the registration of a limited subset of NPOs that make donations or provide services beyond South Africa's borders, where they could potentially be used to finance terrorism. With respect to general concerns raised by religious organizations and persons and the general NPO community, their concerns have been addressed through the amendment as contained in the B version of the bill, particularly to the clause which provides for prescribed registration requirements for NPOs. With respect to the Trust Act, the main concern was beneficial ownership, with most NPOs expressing reservations that NPOs will struggle to implement and access beneficial ownership registers and information, as this may also require technical systems enhancements. We are satisfied with the National Treasury and the financial intelligence sector's undertakings to assist accountable institutions with support before any enforcement action is taken for non-compliance, and that these new obligations covers their concerns. The principle is to be compliant, ask for assistance when you are struggling. On the matter of the Department of Social Development, theirs is to ensure registration of NPOs and not to play oversight over money flows. That province resides with the financial intelligence sector, SARS, and National Treasury. Few in this debate will acknowledge that it was indeed the ANC government which took a conscious decision informed by policy to join the Financial Action Task Force, the global regulator of money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. We did this, honorable members. We did this to protect the country and its citizens and the economy from global syndicates who are using funds to launder money and finance terrorism. The ANC welcomes and supports the General Laws Amendment Bill and the committee amendments. I thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable member. The Honorable the Minister of Finance.
I think, House Chairperson, there's no attempt on our part to steamroll the process other than the conditions not of our choosing, which have necessitated the speed with which we passed this legislation. You will recall that in October last year, when this finding was made by the evaluation report, then we had to sit down and identify the different pieces of legislation that have to be amended. That on its own was a process. Having done that, we have to negotiate with our colleagues. You can see we're amending 5 pieces of legislation belonging to different departments. To come to a conclusion with those is taking us time. The second point is, you will know that in March, as Mr. said, the US Treasury informed us of terrorism funding in the country. They've repeated that, identified others in last month. That in itself shows the extent of the problem, which needs to be attended. Now, to the extent that there are problems which they should be targeted institution and so on, the NGO thing, it's something in principle we can discuss. I think the fundamental point we must agree upon is that this thing is not about a political party interest, not at all. This is about the interest of South Africa, general. It's a national interest, which all of us across political parties must take that into account. That what we're defending about with this legislation is the interest of South Africa, not the interest of any particular. The impact of grey listing is not going to be saving any other body other than is going to impact on South Africa as a whole. In this regard, we would appeal to our colleagues to take that point into account, that what we're dealing with here is national interest, no. And therefore, in the case of national interest, we must bury our political differences and defend the country. I thank the Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, are there any objections to the bill being read a second time?
Chair, please note the objection of the DA.
Noted. ACDP,
Please note the objection of the ACDP. Thank you.
noted.
Chairperson, please note the objection of the FF plus.
Noted, member. Dr. Madisha. Noted, Dr. Madisha. Terrorism.
Chair, no, don't teach me. Chair, do not only note the support of the IFP, the overwhelming support.
Noted, noted, honorable member. With all that,
Honorable Chair, Al Jama also objects.
Honorable Khanif,
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Please note the objection of Al Jama.
noted. Honorable members, having noted the objections, it's agreed to. The secretary will read the bill a second time.
General laws, anti-money laundering and combating terrorism financing amendment bill.
The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. The secretary will read the third order.
Consideration of supplementary report of Portfolio Committee on Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities on filling of vacancies in Commission for Gender Equality.
The Honorable C.N. Daba.
Honorable House Chair, the Portfolio Committee on Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities in fulfilling its mandate identified and recommended suitable candidates to fill vacancies in the Commission for Gender Equality, the CGE, as per the Commission for Gender Equality Act number 39 of 1996. Reports as follow. The Portfolio Committee wishes to clarify certain matters contained in its previous report dated 26 October 2022, which was adopted by the National Assembly on 1 November 2022. Firstly, the first category of commissioners have to fill the unexpired portion of part-time commissioners. Secondly, the other category is for full-term commissioners comprising a mixture of full-time and part-time commissioners. For the unexpired portion of office term, the committee recommended the following persons. Number one, Mr. Bongani Lenton Ngomani, Ms. Lilambal Prabashni Subrayan Naidu, Ms. Sarah Charity Mukwebo, and Ms. Fundiswa Barbara Skweyiya Gushu. The committee recommends that the President of the Republic immediately appoints two part-time commissioners from the above list of candidates as members of the commission to complete the unexpired terms of office, which had been in existence since February and April 2022, respectively. The unexpired portion refers to the remainder of the term of office in which the vacancies occurred, which runs up to 31st of July 2024. For the full term, committee recommended the following persons: Advocate Olaf Ntabisensipanya Mokhale, Advocate Tando Gumere, Ms. Leonesia Leanne van der Merwe, Ms. Lindiwe Konjelwayo, Ms. Bernardine Bacha is a person with disability, and Ms. Mulalo Nematahani. The committee further recommends that the president appoints two candidates on a full-time basis and the other two candidates on part-time basis for the vacancies that occurred from 31st October 2022. Furthermore, taking into consideration that the former Commissioner Advocate Olaf Mokhale Ntabiseng Sepanya Mokhale, my apologies, served as a part-time commissioner for the commission. The committee then recommends that Advocate Sipanya Mohale be appointed as a full-time commissioner so as to ensure continuity and the preservation of institutional memory. The committee further recommends that Advocate Sipanya Mohale be considered for the position of the chairperson for the commission. The report to be considered. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now recognize the Honorable, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Welcome back from COP27. Man, and you need welcome. I move that this House adopt this report as tabled. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize, the motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections. Report agreed to. The fourth order.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendations report of Portfolio Committee on Communications on Government Communication and Information System and Media Development and Diversity Agency.
And I recognize the Honorable, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank
you. Requests for declarations of vote have been received. I will now allow for up to 2 minutes, one member of each political party wishing to make a declaration an opportunity to do so. The DA.
Thank you, Chairperson. The GCIS had irregular expenditure of 4.6 million, and there were people inside procuring services of over R1 million without inviting competitive bids. A perfect example of how cater cronies score big off this ANC government. Basically, the GCIS, otherwise known as the government cheerleading sector, is there to make the government look good, even if it isn't. Its only job is to tell the world what the government wants it to know, and it costs a lot to make this government look good. We're talking 1.3 billion rand a year. Then we have the MDDA with its massive underperformance of nearly 20 million, while overspending to the tune of 8.2 million, 24 million in revenue under collection, and 50 million in irregular expenditure. One has to question the reason for paying the board of this entity nearly R1 million. The AG is scathing, with the financial statements wrongly reported, no proper record keeping, no regular and complete financial and performance reports. But the elephant in the room was the fact that the CFO resigned rather hurriedly after the AG found his appointment was irregular, an appointment that cost over 6 million rand. It's a complete dog's breakfast. They acknowledge that some community media projects will never be able to self-sustain. Projects that rely on constant funding funneled through the state could and should be considered state media. Some even rent premises in government buildings. There are reports of radio stations they pay for that don't actually broadcast, yet their spending rose by 63.5% over 5 years. 850,000 copies of their state-owned newspaper are handed out in obvious competition with the very community print media they're supposed to be supporting. And don't forget, the African News Agency was paid 20 million rand by the State Security Agency to carry positive stories about the government. Wheels within political wheels that no taxpayer should ever have to foot the bills for. The DA will not support this report.
Thank you, Honorable Member. EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the EFF rejected the budgetary review and recommendation report of the PC on communications. The government communications information system is supposed to be a crucial cog in communicating government policy and programs, and it should be a tool through which the viewers of the citizen are relayed back to those who lead the state. The importance of this role is made ever so crucial today. Citizens are in the dark, both literal and figurative, on this mess that ESCOM has become. We hear disjointed communication on lack of maintenance and on depletion of diesel reservoirs, which risk plugging the country into long periods of darkness. But the GCIS is nowhere to be found, leaving this key component of government communications to ESCOM and to Mr. Godan, who have proven to be anything but factional in their approach to the energy crisis in this country. Nothing has shown just how disconnected the state is from the citizen, as the inability to communicate in an efficient manner the state response to this ESCOM crisis. We have often argued here that a medium such as the Vukuzenzele newspaper could be used to communicate at a level far higher than it is currently used for. It is still not reaching the most remote of rural areas and still does not allow for an effective two-way communication between citizens and the state. The news must be a medium for ensuring that even citizen voices are heard, and to ensure that government is able to respond directly to issues raised by the citizens. The less said about the MDDA, the better. The entity has simply been unable to
Thank you very
remark
much,
to go
Honourable
as
Member.
far as promotion local media establishment concerned. We reject this report as EFF.
IFP.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Portfolio Committee on Communications having considered the performance and submission to National Treasury for the midterm. The committee was encouraged to find out that both the GCIS and MTTA received clean audits and met set targets. The MTTA achieved the targets for 21 out of 22 output indicators included in its annual performance plan for 2021-22. The report highlights that one of the key targets not met was concerning research projects funded on key threats impacting the community media sector. The MTTA and the service providers must expedite data collection and assign more human resource for this assignment to be completed, to complete the project in time. As the IFP chair, we are concerned about the approximately 33 million that was spent on overhead costs for employees, as the entity is spending a large portion of its budget paying employee costs. As a result, fewer projects are funded and the community radio stations are neglected. It is reported that the management did not prepare regular, accurate, and complete financial and performance reports, supported and evidenced by reliable information. This is something that the entity should pay more attention to and impart the Auditor General's recommendation. The GCIS managed to keep the vacancy rate at 6.7% during 2021 financial year and reduce the top minimum vacancy rate from 75% to 0% in 2021 financial year. This is encouraging step, and we are also encouraged to find the departments increase the inclusive representation and met the national employment equity targets of 2%, which they achieved at 3.16%. Women representation also, Chair, at the SMS level was achieved at 56%, which is encouraging. So as the IFP hope that the MTTA will finalize the appointment of the CFO, as this is an important role in the entity. The IFP supports the report.
Thank you very much. FF Plus.
No declaration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. ACDP.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, this is a report about the GCIS and the MMDA. One could say this is government spin doctors. And according to the report, the department's outreach programs and activities, in the words of the report, allow the department to interact with communities and often provide an early warning for any societal issues or discontent. So what happened with last year's July riots? Why was there no early warning system? Why were mixed messages shared by different ministers and President Ramaphosa? And obviously there was a lapse there by GCIS. What is interesting is that the report states, on the contrary, that the GCIS, during the unfortunate July 2021 unrest, government messaging was ramped up to restore a sense of calm and demonstrate a responsive government that handled the situation and responded to the people's needs. If only. President Ramaphosa himself said 3 weeks have passed since the country experienced an orchestrated campaign and our security services were found wanting. The expert panel referred to violence never seen before, contestations in public space, including between senior members of government, and a sense of uncertainty and vulnerability amongst the citizens. Anything but a sense of calm. Let's also have a look at the report relating to the 2021 local government elections. where it says, as a result of educating and informing people, millions of South Africans turned up to voting stations. Yes, they did. But remember, only 12 million people out of a possible 26 million people registered to vote, voted. Again, a lapse. So, Chairperson, I realize time is very limited. There are problems with the regression in terms of the audit with both the GCIS and the MDDA, and regrettably, the ACDP will not support this report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The UDM. ATM. Good. NFP.
Thank you, Chairperson. The National Freedom Party notes the BRR reports of the Department of Portfolio Committee on Communications tabled here. I think, Chairperson, my predecessors or colleagues that have spoken are very unreasonable, given the very difficult responsibility that GCIS has, government communication, to actually sell government to the people, to tell the people what a fantastic job government is doing. And it's very difficult for them because, really speaking, there's nothing to sell. You know, the infrastructure is crumbling, crime is at an all-time high. There's so many negative things in the country that these poor GCIs find themselves in a very, very difficult position, trying to look in between if they can find something positive that they can sell. So really speaking, it seems like we have to continue giving them budgets despite their performance being dismal, because they don't have an opportunity. There is no environment for them to be able to communicate to the people on successes. They're so limited in any event. But, you know, Chairperson, the 99.7% of the budget that was spent only yielded 34 targets. And you can see we are very good when it comes to spending budgets. The only thing is this, we don't achieve our targets. The other problem I think we must raise, and I hope that, you know, when we heard Cabinet has sat and discussed issues, a particular policy on cadre deployment and things, this appointment of ministers and MPs as chairpersons of some of these committees as a favor because they have, you know, belong to an organization. I think the time has come when we must put people that are fit for purpose, that have the capacity and the integrity to be able to take us forward. The National Freedom will reluctantly support the report table here today.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The AIC.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the Chapter 4 of the National Development Plan sees the ICT as a critical enabler of economic activity in an increasingly networked world. It further sees ecosystem of digital networks, services, application, content, and devices firmly integrated in the economic and social fabric as an important catalyst in connecting public administration and citizens. The GCIS is one of government's strategic role players in this ecosystem of digital networks, services, application, content, and devices. It draws its constitutional mandate in the Constitution, which requires transparency to be fostered through the provision of timely, accessible, and accurate information to the public. Honorable members, the GCIS performance indicators are a mixture of poor delivery on the one hand and excellent. Committee reports the mandate of the GC having to deliver a coherent government messaging, yet we know that there have been conflicting messages from government around COVID-19 messaging, including communication on the exact terminology to describe the July unrest in KZN. For instance, we never got clarity from government on whether this looting was a coup, a calculated unrest, or both. On the positive note, the GCIS's flagship publication, the Vukuzenzele newspaper, is accessible and also accommodates citizens with site complications. Honorable Chair, the Department of Communications and Digital
Thank you very
Technologies
much, honorable member.
will support the report, Chair.
Thank you. Cope.
Ga ke tswele pele sebata. Re nka fetsa. More.
Ra leboha. PAC. Al-Jama. And ANC.
Honorable House Chair, the late former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, once said, I quote, "Knowledge is power, information is liberating, education is the premise of progress in every society and in every family." I close quote. GCIS plays a pivotal role in empowering society with crucial government information. At the height of COVID-19 pandemic, it was the work of this department that fostered great understanding about the various preventative measures we could take to protect ourselves and those around us. It is in that same spirit that the ANC employs on the department to carry out messaging and campaigns around the key issues of national importance, such as GBVF, ERRP, crime, corruption, job creation, service delivery interventions, amongst other things. Therefore, the African National Congress supports the allocation of 1.3 billion towards the content processing dissemination program, as well as further allocation of 375.4 million towards intergovernmental coordination and stakeholder management programs, which together accounts for 75% of the department budget over the medium term. Not only will this budget allocation drive active citizenry, but it will also help department to conceptualize cohesive campaigns, develop communication strategies, dissemination of information, and stakeholder engagement. Honorable members, this provides the backdrop of the argument the ANC says that a portion of every department communication budget should be allocated to GCIS to enable to better carry out its work. In conclusion, while we commend the ongoing good work of the department and MDDA, would like to urge the department to strengthen its internal SCM controls and follow the advice of AGSA to adhere SCM principles and process, and have a good review of SCM process and proper record keeping to ensure documents are easily accessible and available when requested. The ANC support BRRR on vote for GCIS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable member. I put the motion again. Are there any objections?
Chair, please note the objection of the DA.
Noted. Any other objection? Noted.
Please note the objection of the EFF.
Any other objection? No.
ACDP, thank you.
Noted.
And the
Noted.
objection of the FF plus.
Noted. Having noted that, the report agreed to. The secretary will read the fifth order.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Sport, Arts and Culture.
And I recognize the Honorable, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Mandibulele, sihlalo wendlu, iphakamisa into yoba le ngxelo izawuthatha apha yamkelwe, enkosi.
Thank you very much. The requests for declarations of vote have been received. I will now allow for up to 2 minutes, one member of each political party wishing to make a declaration an opportunity to do so. The DA.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, South Africa is not participating in Soccer World Cup as we speak today. It is shocking. For the past 8 years, we've been calling off soccer in Daba, but the minister is deliberately misleading the committee. And one of the things that we take, the minister is afraid of the nature of Dan and SAFA. The minister has allowed National Arts Council to continue abuse public funds and court processes to achieve improper ending. utilizing litigation against SARA and especially the president of SARA, Ubabunyathela. Chairperson, poverty has manifested in our artists in the sector because of NAC and its department and the entities. Minister, can you please explain who delegated authority for them to shift 65 million rand to the Reserve Bank? And tell us more exactly with this so-called 54 million project, which is a vanity project for Umzansi Orchestra. Under your watch, they've misused 54 million rand, mismanaged and corruption. Now the SIU, Hawks and Public Protector is investigating this. The department has failed to use 10.7 million rand to create job opportunities. National Arts Council cannot even fill critical vacancies, their CEO and others. At the National Arts Council, there's a lack of leadership. Chairperson, we have actors in the Hollywood. Plus minus 1.6 billion rand was underspent by the department. Minister, it's right time for you to sit down and you deserve the red card because you must resign. Our artists must come first. You deserve a red card.
Thank you,
Come on,
Honorable
Minister.
Member. Your
Thank
time is up. Honorable members, whenever gestures of a situation that you find at F&B Stadium takes place in the house will be rowdy. So I would request that we avoid indications of what happens in such stadiums. EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the Minister of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, DSAC, has been busy for the past 2 years fighting battles within and without his department. DSAC has been spending exorbitant amounts of money on vanity projects, while too many artists are still waiting to be saved from the poverty and depression. DSAC continues to fail to address the historical imbalances in the provision of infrastructure for the promotion of arts and sports in our country. Mamelodi residents are angry because the dilapidated falling structure of HMPG Stadium, which was built by the British government, is a den for drug pushers and thugs who are terrorizing the society. The 21.5 million rands a year money-making machine for a few through the creation of National Philharmonic Orchestra is absurd, while the majority of poor artists have to share among themselves 2 million rands per year if they're lucky. Chairperson, it's almost 3 decades into this so-called democracy. The indigenous and traditional spiritual beliefs of our people are still under heavy suppression. Energy centers that are considered holy and spiritual are not accessible to our people. Places like Mutoleng caves in the Free State have been closed off by racist whites such that our people must park several kilometers away and walk for hours to access these sacred places our forefathers have used. This department is quiet about that. It is busy fighting for the protection of the language of former oppressors and support heavy protection of statues and all symbols of colonialism to maintain them using taxpayers' money, but cannot identify and protect these sacred places. DSAC and its minister have failed their mandate. EFF rejects this budgetary review and recommendation report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. IFP. IFP. FF plus.
Dankie, huisvoorsitter. Huisvoorsitter, hierdie departement laat nie net daagliks ons kunstenaars en ander kreatiewes in die bedryf in die steek nie, maar ook ons sportlei. Die minister van Sport, Kuns en Kultuur het gedurende sy 2019 begrotingsrede uitblinker Down-syndroom atlete as eregaste op die galery verwelkom en met hulle prestasies gespog. Tog word hierdie atlete nou verhoed om aan internasionale kompetisies deel te neem en is selfs hulle deelname aan die komende Paralimpiese spele in 2024 in gedrang, omdat lidmaatskap net eenvoudig nie betaal word nie. Die nasionale liggaam SASSA-II beskou hierdie atlete se lot en prestasies as gering en word die stryd om deelname te verseker al vir etlike jare gevoer met geen poging of teken van die politieke wil van die departement se kant af om deelname van hierdie atlete te verseker nie. Voorsitter, daar is vele kunstenaars wat steeds nie die eisere greep wat op hulle inkomste en lewensmiddele geplaas is deur die COVID-19 pandemie kan afskud nie. Hierdie departement het ook geensins bygedra in daardie stryd nie. Plaaslike teaters en ander infrastruktuur is in 'n jammerlike toestand. Weereens met geen tekens van verbetering of die politieke wil om hierdie infrastruktuur om die al ewige belofte van sosiale kohesie of nasiebou gestand te doen nie. Dit is alles net lippediens. Die bewaring van ons kultuurskatte en erfenis is nog 'n bewys dat hierdie departement misluk. Erfenisgebiede word jammerlik verwaarloos. Die agteruitgang en die minagting van die mense van Suid-Afrika se erfenis is skandelik en weer eens sit die party net eenvoudig agteroor. Fondse gaan daagliks verlore soos met die omstrede Mzansi orkessage en gefaalde entiteite soos Pakhofs in die Vrystaat word bloot toegelaat om verder agteruit te gaan. Nee, voorsitter, hierdie verslag kan geen regdenkende, logiese, patriotiese Suid-Afrikaner ondersteun nie. Alvorens hierdie departement nie erns maak met die taak wat hom opgelees nie, sal dit net so nutteloos soos sy begrotingsvorderingsverslag wees. Ek dankie.
Thank you, Honorable Member. UDM.
Honorable Chairperson.
Sorry, SADP. Sorry, Honorable Troy. SADP.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. In considering this report, the ACGP asserts that this is yet another department in need of an overhaul. The department did not escape the Auditor General's scrutiny, who stated that effective and appropriate steps were not taken to prevent irregular expenditure of some 59.7 million caused as a result of non-compliance with DORA. The Auditor General also found a lack of consequence management, as investigations were not conducted into the majority of allegations of financial misconduct committed by officials. Additionally, the department displayed internal control deficiencies because leadership did not exercise adequate oversight responsibility over compliance with applicable legislation. This department also repeats the anomaly of other sister departments where budget spent, that is 98.2% in this case, exceeds the 76% targets achieved. Honorable House Chairperson, sports, arts, culture transcends language, political, social, and cultural boundaries and has the powerful effect of bringing members of South Africa together. Looking at the first quarter of 22-23, the ACDP notes with dismay that only 14.5% of the budget for recreation, development, and sports promotion was spent, and only 55% of the budget for arts and culture promotion and development was spent. This is an injustice to the people of South Africa. The ACDP does not support this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. UDM.
Honorable Chairperson. Sorry to intervene like this. It's Singh here from the IFP. Honorable Lutuli had a problem. Can Honorable Zondo make a contribution to this debate? Thank you.
Honorable Singh.
Yeah,
We are doing declarations here.
Yes, the declarations.
And,
the IFP.
I thought we had given the IFP a chance, but it's fine. If not, we'll request the IFP to come behind the UDM, as I've already called. UDM? Okay. IFP?
Honorable Chairperson, the COVID-19 pandemic really impacted the sport, art and culture industry in these industries where we're unable to generate income, resulting in their main focus presented being on the state progressing toward recovery. This is also evident that in the government shifting approach from the economic relief to sustainable economic recovery. For the department on the part of economic recovery, we find the accumulation of irregular expenditure rather than strain. During the 2021-2022 financial year, the department incurred an additional 5.7 million in irregular expenditure. The department cited non-approval by the National Treasurer as a reason for these expenditures. Considering the large sum of income lost due to the absolute health caused by the pandemic, we wish to emphasize the committee recommendation that the department should strengthen its oversight function to ensure that they have adequate measures in place to prevent irregular expenditures. This recovery phase that the department is also providing the perfect platform to further implementation department transformation agenda. We regard the promotion of the minority sporting code in township and rural schools as one such way to implement this transformation. Therefore, we urge the recommendation that the successful grassroots projects such as a Langa Hook Club should be represented nationally. The IFP support the report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. AGM. Good. NFP. AIC.
No declaration, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. PAC. Al Jamal. And ANC.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. The ANC rise to support the budget and review recommendation report of the Department of Sports because of its advances a critical mandate of harnessing our sports, arts and culture. Through this department's mandate, we conserve and protect our culture, arts, heritage, and history as a people. Department has made significant strides in supporting creative arts and sports persons to promote their talents and sustain their livelihoods. Through the Portfolio Committee, we have consistently strengthened governance and accountability by the department and its entities. We did so to improve the capability of the department and its entities. The fact that the department received 10 unqualified audits with no findings and 15 unqualified audits with findings, and only 3 out of 28 reflects that the department is relatively stable from a government perspective, despite its outlier entities with challenges. We have recommended that the department improve its recruitment turnaround to expedite appointments to strengthen the various leadership roles, resulting in underspending. We recommended a focus on finalizing investigations underway and effective implementation of consequence management. Transformation remains a thorny issue in the sector because of its class, racial, and gender inequalities in several sporting codes. We have also recommended that the department strengthen its infrastructure development projects to close the inequality gap, which sustains a binary of development and underdevelopment in our country. The ANC support the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I put the motion again. Are there any objections?
Chair, please note the objection of the DA.
Noted.
Voorzitter, en die Vryheidsfront Plus.
Noted.
Thank you, Chair.
And
Please
the
note the
ICDP, thank
objection
you.
of the EFF. Thank you.
Noted. ICDP noted as well. With those noted comments, it's agreed to. The Secretary will read the sixth order.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land Reform, and Rural Development on vote 29.
I now recognize the Honorable the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, I move that the report be adopted by this House. Thank you.
Requests for declarations of vote have been received. I will now allow for up to 2 minutes. One member of each political party wishing to make a declaration and opportunity to do so. The DA.
Yeah, Pajas.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
House Chair, after
Can-
28 years, there is no doubt that whatever the ANC government touches turns to ruin. The Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development is no exception. Out of its 8 entities, only 2 can be said to be working optimally. The rest, if not embroiled in court litigations, have qualified audit reports with repeat findings. Fruitless, wasteful, and irregular expenditure are the order of the day, with absolutely no intent on consequence management. In Onderstepoort, only 48% of planned targets were met, with a high vacancy rate of 29%. Even the good manufacturing practice facility has still to be built. Despite the department having spent 94% of its final appropriation, it failed to deliver on 40% of its service delivery targets. What we witnessed on joint oversight to all 9 provinces proved that only 108 labor tenant applications were processed and finalized out of a target of 1,000. This dismal result, despite the appointment of the Special Master of Labor Tenants at the Land Claims Court. People on the ground are feeling the pain of non-delivery, whilst government fat cats, including those on my right, are remunerated every month without fail. Smallholder farmers are on their own, despite the introduction of the Presidential Employment
Honorable
Stimulus
members,
Initiative
Honorable
to help
members.
sustain self-employment for subsistence producers. The process became a logistical nightmare, which resulted in 1.1 billion of voted funds being surrendered back to National Treasury. The Auditor General found that the department was unable to provide adequate evidence that the goods were actually received by the intended beneficiaries, resulting in the qualified audit outcome. These are but the highlights of the ruin by this incompetent,
Thank you very
blundering
much,
department.
Honorable
The
Member.
Democratic Alliance will not support this disheartening report.
EFF.
Thank you so much, House Chairperson. House Chairperson, the EFF wants to categorically state that it rejects this budgetary review and recommendation report for the following crimes committed against the people of South Africa. For the financial report of the current year, the department was appropriated a total amount of 18 billion. It spent approximately 17 billion of the appropriate funds, which is about 93.3%. 1.1 billion of which could not be spent and was surrendered back to National Treasury. This is a serious crime. The department incurred total irregular expenditure amounting to 208.7 million, an increase from the 203.8 million incurred in 2020-2021. Approximately 204.5 million of the irregular expenditure was historic from both the former departments and was due to non-compliance with supply chain management procedures. Of the total irregular expenditure of 208.7 million, only 5.4 million is under determination and investigation. Of all entities reported or reporting to the department, Ngonyama Trust Board and the Agricultural Land Holding Account are serial offenders and regularly on the wrong side of the law. Both entities, the audit opinion shows some serious transgressions and accountability shortcomings. We call for the finalization of investigation of alleged and related maladministration in affairs of the department in relation to the mismanagement of the comprehensive agricultural support program. There is a presidential proclamation in this regard for the SIU to conclude its investigation and deal with the rot within the department. Having concluded visits to some of the labor tenants in different farming areas and got exposed to the levels of insecurity, evictions, poverty, and impediments to the livelihoods of activities. The committee was extremely concerned by
Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
performance in the finalization of labor tenants applications. Honorable Chair, the EFF would want to record once more.
Thank you
its
very much,
rejection
Honorable Member.
to the tabling of this report. Thank you so much.
IFP.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, our agricultural sector is in a state of crisis. The department lacks the will and coordination to realize its constitutional mandate, and this is against the backdrop of a huge need for the department to do better in taking care of our people through programs that promote job creation and better financial management. It is telling that we are always commenting on the bad financial management of government departments, and this department is no exception. The under-expenditure of the department, when we have hundreds of struggling farmers and rural economies, is a concern we resonate with. The consistent feature of irregular and wasteful expenditure has attached itself to the government and its departments at the expense of our people. The millions that government recklessly spends might seem like a drop in the ocean. However, when we put this in retrospect to what we could have done for our rural and farming communities and people, then the number is overwhelming. We cannot accept the use of almost the entire budget for results that are just over the halfway mark. The continued use of the COVID-19 pandemic as a scapegoat for the lack of progress should be done away with. Results such as the 100% of the budget used for Program 1 of the department, but 50% target achievements reflects a clear disconnect between the will to do more by the department and even more, no regard for the people it serves. The department continues to compromise on its mandate to create employment in the sector and facilitate comprehensive rural development. This is indicative of its under-expenditure towards a presidential employment stimulus initiative, underachievement of targets in the land development support program, allocation of land to vulnerable groups, and land acquisition for farm dwellers and labor tenants. The improvement of our people's standard and quality of living, as well as socioeconomic positions, are closely tied to these initiatives, and it is clear that the department has no regard for that. We as the IFP plead that the government starts taking the needs of our people seriously and realize the responsibility they have to the people. We share the committee's sentiments on the preservation and nurturing of the department's relationship. Thank you very much. We will accept this report. Thank you.
FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Voorsitter, daar is verskeie sake binne die departement en sy entiteite wat kommerwekkend is. Daar is ongelukkig nie vandag tyd om ons al die foute uit te wys nie en sal ek slegs sekeres uitwys. Maar die kort en die lank is dat die departement sy eie huis in orde gaan moet kry. Een van die departement se hoofdoelwitte is om programme daar te stel om boere by te staan om te verseker dat die land voedselsekuriteit het. As ons kyk na hoe hierdie departement die voortslepende back and closure uitbraak hanteer het tot dusver, verder gaan kyk na krisisse soos in die sitrusbedryf en nie net uitvoere nie, maar die verskeie protesoptogte landwyd, dan laat dit veel te wense toe en wil dit blyk asof landbouers nie vir die departement van landbou belangrik is nie. Die departement faal keer op keer sy boere, maak nie saak van hulle grootte nie. Ons het al droogtes en vloede en pla en siektes binne die afgelope jaar in landbou ervaar, maar die departement onderspandeer fondse met betrekking tot voorwaardelike toekennings wat juis hiervoor geoormerk is. Die departement het in 2021-22 1,1 miljard rand geonderspandeer. Program 3, that includes food security, received the largest appropriation of all programs and amounted to 9.5 billion rand. But the department only spent 80% of its allocation for food security, despite the increasing levels of food insecurity in the country. Underspending was specifically attributed to the issues with the Presidential Employment Stimulus Initiative. The AGSA had an audit finding on PSC. They were unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence relating to goods and services, including the prepayments as managed did not implement adequate internal controls for proof of delivery of the goods to the intended beneficiaries. As members of the committee, we were also confronted by this. Ons boere, al ons boere, verdien beter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honourable Member. ACDP.
Honorable House Chairperson, the ACDP notes the expectations of the National Development Plan stating that by 2030, 1 million new jobs should be created and a surplus, trade surplus is to be created from agriculture, agro-processing and related sectors, where 1/3 of the food trade surplus should be produced by smallholder producers. All this is easier said than done. when looking at the performance of this department, irregular expenditure is up to 208 million from 203 in 2020-21, and only 5.4 million is under determination and investigation. The department incurred fruitless and wasteful expenditure of some 36 million, and only 33,000 is under determination and investigation. An additional 56.6 million of fruitless and wasteful expenditure is still under assessment in relation to non-compliance with policies. Considering performance targets against program expenditure, the department fails once again in the area of service delivery. Only 60% of the targets were achieved, while 93.9% of the appropriated budget was spent. The largest cost driver for the administration program is compensation of employees. This totals some 1.5 billion or 46% of the program. Of great concern is the statement that this program is consistent in spending 100% of its appropriated budget, but with little improvement in performance. The ACGP contends that these dismal results, the agricultural expectations of the NDP, are just a pipe dream, and in fact, the enemy of land redistribution and development. The dysfunctionality within the department must be sorted out. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The UDM. ATM. Good. NFP. AIC.
Thank you, Chair. The NDP, while it is not insignificant, is the latest installment in providing a national blueprint for the development of agricultural sector, including the reform of land regime to provide gender security, restitution, and rural development for our people. The celebrated blueprints, such as the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan and the ASGISA, laid the foundation on the reform of the agricultural sector. ASGISA catalogued agriculture and agro-processing as having similar opportunities as tourism and BPO. Despite these noble frameworks, the department's performance and service delivery needs continue to be hampered by its irregular expenditure items, which amounted to 208 million rand, an increase from the 203 million rand incurred in 2021 financial year. The department also incurred fruitless and wasteful expenditure of 36 million during the 2021-22 financial year. It is worrying that the department, which must be at the center of transforming and restructuring the agricultural sector while ensuring the participation and inclusion of Black and rural producers in the mainstream economy of the country and globally, is not having its priorities right. One other concern, Honorable Chair, we cannot drive rural development and secure progressive rural land tenure as long as there is no effort to deal with neglected or unaccounted state farms, which are largely inhabited by people with no lease agreement with the state. Such state farms are no longer conducive for any development or production, as there are no people who tilt the land or who are entrusted with the responsibility to develop and make these farms productive and in every sense of the word. This denies the state revenue and lends itself to illegal land occupation. We nonetheless support the report, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. PAC. Al-Jama.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair, this is a department that we need to support. We've noticed incremental improvements, and this must be because of the leadership that we're getting from their portfolio committee. However, we would like to suggest that there be a special program where produce is pre-bought so that those venturing into this business do not have to suffer the financial risk if their products are not sold. This was used in Zimbabwe very well, and they're still using it. And I would like to suggest that the department looks at the special program. Al-Jamaa will support this report.
Thank you very much. ANC.
Oh, Mascob. The ANC takes note of the importance of the agricultural sector in helping grow our economy and the potential that the sector has in the creation of mass employment opportunities. We take note of the challenges faced by the sector, such as the outbreak of foot and mouth disease and the climate change-induced devastating impact of droughts and flash floods. It is for these reasons, as the ANC, we consciously use the budget allocation as a tool to finance our policy priorities aimed at eradicating of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, while addressing issues of race, class, and gender equity. We are concerned by the findings of the Auditor General on wasteful and irregular expenditure, and we are encouraged by the committee's recommendations in the PRRR and the department's positive approach in responding to the findings of the AGSA. We acknowledge funding challenges still faced by many of our emerging smallholder farmers, especially the rural women and youth farmers. And we have called for enhanced accountability on the Agri-BE Fund and Mafisa. In support of this PRRR, we put emphasis on the radical implementation of the Black Producers Commercialization Program and call for increased funding for the blended financing model at the land bank with the enhanced accountability by the bank and access to funding, as well as an effective implementation of the mandate of the Land and Agricultural Bank of South Africa. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC supports this PRRR of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I put the motion again. Are there any objections?
Please note the objection of the DA.
Noted.
And of the Freedom Front Plus.
Noted.
And the ICDP, thank you.
Noted.
Please note the objection of the EFF.
Noted, honorable members. Having noted that, it's agreed to. 7th to 9th orders.
Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans on 2021-2022 annual reports of Armaments Corporation of South Africa and Castle Control Board. Consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans on 2021-22 annual report of Department of Military Veterans. And consideration of budgetary review and recommendation report of Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans on 2021-22 annual report on Department of Defense.
And I'll recognize the Honorable, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. I move that the reports be adopted by this House.
Thank you. Requests for declarations of vote have been received. I will now allow for up to 2 minutes, one member of each political party wishing to make a declaration, an opportunity to do so. The DA.
Chairperson, it will be a challenge to maintain and rebuild our defense capabilities in the light of a dwindling defense budget, increased unfunded military deployments, unsustainable increase in the cost of employees in excess of 70% of the budget, further dilapidation and unserviceability of our prime mission equipment, the damning findings by the Auditor General and the Public Protector of irregular, wasteful and illegal spending on, among others, Project Tusano to benefit the Cubans at the expense of South Africa, and the lack of consequence management. The additional funds for Operation Vikela is encouraging, where soldiers are subjected to the worst conditions, poor logistical support, even basics like food, uniforms, combat shoes, spares, and inadequate airlift capability and attack support. Unfortunately, staff got away with transgressions and illegal activities without consequences. It seems like some general staff acts with impunity and no consequence management by the Minister, Secretary of Defense and their chief. Minister, beloftes is gemaak dat selfs lede van die generale staf nie ongestraf gelaat sal word nie, maar dis waar dit geëindig het. Hoe kan ons dissipline in die weermag verwag terwyl lede van die generale staf wegkom sonder enige gevolge? We must act fast and decisively to redesign, restructure, reprioritize and re-equip our arms of services. We must stop favoring Cuba and Russia at our expense. Our military veterans have been poorly treated, and despite the Deputy President's hollow promises, is it apparent the resources and the will to provide them the dignity and security they deserve is lacking. Minister, only you can hold the DG and her staff accountable for not providing all statutory forces and non-statutory forces the benefits they deserve. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. EFF.
Chairperson, the EFF rejects the budgetary review and recommendations report of Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans. The Department of Defense in its current form has not achieved its intended goals. Firstly, the force design of the military has not improved. The Defense Force is still populated by an aging population, and nothing has been done to enlist young members of the force. The bulk of the defense budget is spent on salary payments on soldiers who have passed their prime time as soldiers who the country can depend on their fitness levels during combat missions. The failure of the department to put all the aged on pension, citing the loss of skills, is a typical example of the clueless department that seeks to regard the Department of Defense as an employment agency. Of specific concern is the lack of investment in the SNDF prime mission equipment. The Navy vessels are in need of urgent need of midlife upgrades, and the funds are not availed by Treasury. There is no technological advancement, military force capable of executing its task effectively. However, 225 million was allocated by National Treasury for the Defense, DOD, to purchase technology for border safeguarding. The DOD ended up using only 85 million. The balance was used for unintended purposes. And the 2022 BRRR, which should repurpose funds for borderline technology acquisition to a department that lacks consequence management for fruitless and wasteful expenditure. There is a constant need for continued investment in defense research and development. Most notably, Project Hoofster has been one of the worst projects the department has undertaken, in which billions of rands were unaccounted for. This had a negative output to AMSCO. The fighting vehicles have been delayed by more than 10 years. The Department of Military Veterans failed in its mission to provide socio-economic support to military veterans. And
thank you very much.
And the dependents. The department underspent on its budget 91.8 million. There are a few of the challenges.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your time is up.
Defend the nation has been dramatically compromised. We reject this BRRR.
IFP.
Honourable Chairperson, it's safe to say that the department has been struggling for several years to match the budget expenditure with the high cost of technology needed to protect the nation borders. More worrying, it is responsibility to provide service to military veterans has become a matter of concern, such as an access to pension fund. We are aware of the recent commitment made by the Deputy President, Honourable Didi Mabuza, regarding the government commitment to making funds available for pensions. We encourage the government to honor this commitment and ensure that the safety yet eases access to those who qualify for pension. Honourable Minister, your department, according to the report, has quite worrying critical occupation vacancy rate. This needs to be addressed as the department and how defensive operating globally require that leadership be central to how our military operations are conducted. Without proper leadership, we will see a rapid decline in service and in capabilities in this department. There is an alarming percentage of vacancies. For example, in airspace control, there is a vacancy rate of 11.5%. In Ekurhuleni, there's a vacancy rate of 25%. In nursing, there's a vacancy rate of 16.6%. In technically, there's a vacancy rate of 23.3%. These are incredible critical components to the functioning of this department operation. It is reported that there is a more than about 300 million rand as a cost of sick leave to the department in the last financial year. Yet a vacancy rate of over 16% exists within nursing. The department must prioritize addressing the vacancies rate and put in place measures to ensure that the staff members are fit to reduce the amount of sick leave. In closing, Chairperson, irregular expenditure according to the DOD amounted to 3.153 billion for 2021.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
Oh, so say that. The IFE support the report. Thank you.
Thank you. FF plus.
No declaration, Chair.
Thank you. ACDP.
House Chairperson, this is the third consecutive financial year in which the Department of Defense has received a qualified audit opinion. Furthermore, irregular expenditure rose from 2.1 billion rands in the previous financial year to 3.1 billion rands this financial year. Despite overspending on compensation of employees, the Department of Defense has not put in place proper internal controls to keep track of leave taken by staff. Further evidence of negligence is that the Department of Defense was not able to tell the Auditor General where to find movable tangible assets with a value of 64.7 billion rands. With respect to the auditing of Project Tusano, the department was reportedly even uncooperative with the Auditor General, who correctly regards contracts under this project as irregular. Should this project continue until January 2025 as planned, over 2.5 billion rands will have been spent on paying Cuban technicians to maintain South African military equipment, which the ACDP condemns. We cannot afford to fund the Cuban state while over a third of our own people are officially unemployed. The Department of Defense needs ring-fenced allocations to upgrade our frigates and submarines, to finance border control technology, to renew contracts for environmentally controlled South African Army warehouses, and to ensure that our strategic airlift capacity is in place. Departmental spending is close to 100%, and committee has repeatedly called for essential budget allocations to be ring-fenced. There is also a 37% shortage of engineers with vacancies that are presumably
Thank you very much,
unfunded.
Honorable
Thank you.
Member. UDM. ATM. Good. NFP. AIC. PAC. Al Jamal.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair, we feel that it's very important for the Defence Force to move to the next level, and that is to employ best practices so that our men in uniform can defend our country. One of the areas that has been neglected is proper housing. So after 30, 40 years service, we find that they are left out in the cold. I have spoken to the head of the Defence Force about that, and I would like to compliment him that he feels that the Defence Force must look at best practices for their employees, and the Defence Force should be a best practice outfit. Al Jamaa supports the report. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. ANC.
Thank you, Chair. The ANC support the BRRR report of the Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans for the Department of Defence and Military Veterans, Armaments Corporation of South Africa and Castle Control Board. We are concerned that as in the past 2 financial years, the DoD received a qualified audit opinion from the Auditor General for 2021-22. This is a matter that the department should improve on in the coming financial year. In particular, the areas of irregular expenditure in which the department did not fully record irregular expenditure in the notes to the financial statements as required by PFMA. Also on movable tangible assets, where the AG was unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence for movable tangible capital assets, as the department could not indicate where these assets are located or provide other information relating to the existence of these assets. What is further worrying is the lack of cooperation by the DoD with the AG South Africa in its auditing of Project Tusano and the value for money that the project offers. We are, however, encouraged that the DoD acknowledged that it provided the relevant information to AXA at a later stage and that the department takes responsibility for this lapse in cooperation. We will ensure that the department live up to its commitment to cooperate with the AG. We support the recommendation that the DoD prioritizes 140 million from its allocation for 23-24 for the purpose of border safeguarding technology as force multipliers, subject to this reprioritization be carried out and spent successfully. We further support the recommendation that further ring-fenced allocation for border safeguarding technology by National Treasury for the outer years of the MTF 2023 and TEF be supported. The ANC support this report.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I put the motion again. Are there any objections? EFF?
Thank you, Chair. Please note the objection of the EFF.
No, noted. ACDP?
Please note the objection of the ACDP.
Noted. No further objections. Report agreed to. We now come to motions without notice. Does any member of the ANC wish to give a motion without notice?
Thank you, Chairperson. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes with sadness the passing on of TV and radio personality Ms. Pearl Shongwe at the age of 35. On Tuesday, 8 November 2022, further notes that she was a news reader on Metro FM and presenter on SABC 1 talk show Daily Theta at the time of her passing. Excuse. Remembers that Ms. Shongwe's career in broadcasting started at 2010. Then she worked with youth radio station YFM as a broadcasting entertainment reporter. Further note, remember that she later joined the South African Broadcasting Corporation as a sport presenter. Recalls that she is known as a dynamic force in the media industry, a seasoned presenter and a passionate and career-driven person, believes that untimely passing on has robbed the media industry of a talented, knowledgeable, and versatile anchor.
Honourable Member. There's a point of order.
House Chairperson, and I'm sorry to interrupt the member, but we've got a minister giggling through the speech of her own colleague there. It's disrupting her own member of caucus because she's laughing to whatever she's hearing in her earpiece. It's completely out of order.
Thank you, honorable member. Thank you. Can you continue, Honorable Adam? That was not necessary.
Thank
Can you
you,
continue,
Chairperson.
Honorable Adams? You still have a few seconds left. Let's be in order, honorable members. Let's continue with the work. Honorable Adams.
Thank you, Chairperson. Believes that the untimely passing on has robbed the media industry of a talented and knowledgeable and versatile anchor, and extends its deepest condolences to the Songwe family, friends, and colleagues in the media. I so move.
Thank you very much, honorable member. I put the motion. No objection, agreed to. DA.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that Community Circle SA celebrated its second anniversary on the 9th of November 2022. Recalls that Community Circle SA is a voluntary organization founded to provide assistance and advice to South Africans living abroad. Recognizes that Community Circle SA has grown to almost 22,000 members since its founding, and conveys its thanks to the founder, Kim Milner-Kerr, and her team of volunteers for their tireless work in providing assistance to South Africans living abroad. I so move.
Thank you, honorable member. I put the motion. No objections. Motion agreed to. EFF.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I rise on behalf of the economic freedom fighters to move without notice that the House knows the recent vicious attacks by pit bulls on ordinary civilians, particularly children, in the recent weeks and months. Further sends its condolences to the families of the 3- and 8-year-old boys who were mauled to death by pit bulls in the Free State, and the 10-year-old boy.
I see. Sorry about that, honorable member. Can you continue?
Thank you. And the 10-year-old boy who was mauled to death by a pit bull in Gqeberha, Eastern Cape. And the many families who have lost children due to pit bulls, particularly in Mpumalanga and Cape Town in the recent years. Acknowledges that pit bulls are a dangerous breed of dog, which is often bred for purposes of inflicting violence on unknown human intruders, or to deter crime for the dog fighting, or for dog fighting as well. Acknowledge that the dog, which has the propensity to be used to deter crime by human beings, cannot differentiate between humans, which are a threat, and those which are not, based on the breed attacking even children of its owners. Further acknowledge that despite negative breeding patterns, the pit bull breed is inherently aggressive. Acknowledge that much pain, trauma, and injury has been caused by the dog attacks. Call for an inquiry into the domestic pet ownership of pit bulls, which may include public hearings and subsequently a complete ban on the domestic ownership of pit bulls as domestic pets. I so move.
Thank you, honorable member. I put the motion. No objections. Motion agreed to. ANC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. The African National Congress put forward the motion without notice on major breakthrough on genomics in a breast and ovarian cancer screening. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House knows that the Dr. Narina van der Merwe, principal scientist within the University of Free State Division of Human Genetics and the National Laboratory Services, and her colleagues, Jaco Oosthuizen, in collaboration with the project with research group in the University of Stellenbosch, have came with a new cost-effective genetic testing for breast and ovarian cancer, which is key to our country. understand that the once implementation of this operational women with the types of cancers in the families can be quickly, easily, and cheaply screened with a method that can identify risk pretty early. Further understand that the using of new technology based on the rapid point of care, which is POC testing, they have implemented a new diagnostic test of familial breast and ovarian cancer.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I put the motion. No objections, motion agreed to. IFP.
Siyabonga Sihlalo. On behalf of the IFP, I move that this House first note that the rural land restoration community of Mkundeni in KwaZulu-Natal and traditional leader Inkosi Mabaso was awarded this year's World Wildlife Fund Living Planet Award at WWF South Africa's annual general meeting on the 11th of November. Number two, further notes that the WWF's Living Planet Award is given annually to exceptional South Africans who, through their catalyst contribution, inspire people to live in harmony with nature. Three, acknowledges that in October 2009, the Mkundeni community became the first communal landowners in the province to enter into a voluntary biodiversity stewardship agreement with Ezenville located on the life, committing 124 hectares of their land to conservation. Four, further acknowledge that the rural community is most reliant on livestock and small-scale farming within this high-altitude, biodiverse part of grassland biome, which also falls within a strategic water source area, and that for over 20 years, this community has shown incredible foresight and constant dedication as an active custodian of their biodiversity-rich land in KwaZulu-Natal. And number five, congratulates the Mkundeni community in KwaZulu-Natal for receiving this award for their pioneering role in community-led landowner stewardship. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. FF plus.
Honorable Chairperson, I rise on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus to move without notice that the House 1 notes the current protests in Tehran and several other Iranian cities where police stations and vehicles were torched on Thursday night. 2. Further notes that the unrest was triggered by the death of an Iranian woman detained by the Islamic Republic's morality police. 3. Also notes that Masha Amini, 22, died last week in police custody after being arrested for wearing unsuitable attire by the morality police in Tehran. She allegedly improperly wore her headscarf. 4. Acknowledges that this incident has now further escalated in that the Iranian national soccer team last night on the world stage refused to sing their national anthem before the start of their game against England at the World Cup. 5. Sends its condolences to the family of Masha Amini and all the women of Iran, while calling on all governments to respect, protect, and enhance the rights and dignity of all women. I so move.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, motion agreed to. ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The ANC moves without notice that the House notes with sadness the passing on of the Eastern Cape magistrate who was gunned down on Saturday, 12 November 2022, while traveling with her husband and children, and understands that the 38-year-old Mount Aleph magistrate and her family were traveling from another village when they came under fire. Further understands that a white Ford Ranger double cab pretended to be overtaking their car, and the identified occupants started shooting at the family vehicle. We acknowledge that the magistrate succumbed to gunshots injuries while the husband and the 13-year-old son suffered serious gunshot wounds. Further acknowledges that the 10-year-old escaped unscathed. We call on the police to leave no stone unturned in their investigation and to bring the perpetrators of this heinous act to book. and conveys its condolences to the family of the magistrate and wishes the husband and the son a speedy recovery. Thanks, House Chair.
Thank you very much. I put the motion. No objections, motion agreed to. ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. On behalf of the ACDP, I move without notice that the House notes yet another crash involving a truck and 3 vehicles on the M35 in Isipingo, Durban, which left 7 people dead. Offers our condolences to the families who lost their loved ones, and further notes that in October alone, more than 55 truck accidents were reported in KwaZulu-Natal. Calls on the Minister of Transport to improve our rail network and to work with truck owners and drivers to reduce the fatalities on our roads. I so move.
Thank you very much. I put the motion. No objections, motion agreed to. UDM. ATM. DA.
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that Hoër Volk School in Ekurhuleni recently celebrated its centenary. Further notes that Hoër Volk School was established as the first Afrikaans medium school in the then Kaapland in 1922 in response to the growing numbers of Afrikaans-speaking residents in both the town and the outlying areas. Acknowledges that Hoër Volk School has a strong sporting tradition despite its relatively small size, and that 20 sportsmen and women attained provincial colors, while one also received national colors for rugby, cricket, swimming, archery, golf, and shooting in 2021 alone. Recognizes that Hoër Volk School also encourages a balanced learning experience with cultural activities such as debating, choir, and chess on offer. Recalls that Hoër Volk School boasted a 98.3% matric pass rate for 2021, with 38 subject A's and 65% of learners who qualified for bachelor degree admission. Congratulates Hoër Volk School on its centenary and wishes the principal, staff, and learners continued success. I so move.
Thank you very much. I put the motion. No objections. Motion agreed to. EFF.
Thank you, Chair. I rise on behalf of the economic freedom fighters to move without notice that the House notes the decision of the Constitutional Court on the 21st of November to compel the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services to grant parole to Janusz Walus. Further notes that Janusz Walus is a Polish right-wing immigrant who was arrested in 1993 for assassinating anti-apartheid hero, commander of Umkhonto weSizwe, and General Secretary of the SACP, crises. Acknowledges that the death of Ani almost pushed the country into a civil war, and that by killing Ani, his assassins thought they were killing the very idea of freedom for Black people in the country. Further acknowledges that Ani's death continues to cause immense pain to his wife and children and the rest of the family, to his comrades and the rest of South Africa who looked up to him as a leader of principle. Upon his shoulders, the aspirations of the people rested. Recognizes that many of the social, political, and judicial injustices that Ani dedicated his life fighting against are still prevalent in this country, and that for exactly that reason, his life and what it represented will continue to resonate with millions of oppressed and exploited South Africans. Sends its words of appreciation for the role Ani played to his family and the party he led, and sends words of comfort to Mrs. Hani in particular, affirming to her that this House and South Africans in general still hold Mr. Hani in very high esteem. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I put the motion. There are no objections. The motion is agreed to. ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes that 6 outstanding South African women scientists were recognized for their contribution to science at this year's L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science National Awards ceremony held in Johannesburg on the 3rd November 2022. Further notes that this year's recipients, Dr. Tilona Arumugem, Dr. Renee Boysen, Ms. Witumelo Mabaka Chaba, Dr. Fazana Mohammed, Dr. Asanda Mtinzilana, and Ms. Jessica Thibault join a long list of women scientists honored by L'Oreal and UNESCO every year. Acknowledges that as part of this recognition, each woman received a generous grant in support of their PhD and postdoctoral studies. Understand that the Foundation, L'Oreal, and UNESCO have worked together for more than 20 years to help empower more women scientists to achieve scientific excellence and participate equally in solving the significant challenges facing humanity, and congratulate the 6 outstanding women scientists for displaying a high degree of excellence in the field of science. Ke a leboga.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I put the motion. There are no objections, so the motion is agreed to. Good. NFP. ANC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes that the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women will mark the launch of the Unite campaign from 25th November to 10th December, an initiative of 16 days of activism concluding on the day that commemorates the International Women's Rights Day. Further notes that this year campaign Unite activism to end violence against women and girls will aim to mobilize all society to become activists for the prevention of violence against women, to stand in solidarity with women, to stand in solidarity with women's rights activists, and to support feminist movement around the world to resist the rollback on women's rights. Understand that the violence against women and girls is one of the most widespread, persistent, and devastating women's rights violence in our world today, and remains largely unreported due to the impunity, silence, and stigma and shame surrounding it. Believes that violence against women continues to be an obstacle to
Thank you very much,
achieving
Member.
equality, development, peace, and as well as to the fulfillment of women and girls' women's rights. Further
If
believes
there are-
that the promise
Thank
of
you
the-
very much, Honorable Member. Your
Okay,
time
thank
is
you.
up.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, the motion is agreed to. AIC. ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. Chair, the African National Congress moves without notice that the House knows that at the recent Falling World Science Summit in Berlin, the hotly contested breakthrough of the year category saw not just first place, but also second awarded to South Africans. Further notes that the summit is one of the biggest get-togethers of the global scientific community, held for 3 days during the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, which separated East and West Berlin for nearly 28 years. Understands that the first place went to the University, to Wits University, Tablings Sasha Naidu, for her intervention that tackles acid mine drainage in a circular economy. And second place went to Amahon from the University of Cape Town, who has come up with a way of managing or making super strong tackles out of calcium and urea in a way that requires a negligible amount of energy, and congratulates both Ms. Naidu and Ms. Horn on their much deserved wins, and wishes them best and much success in the field of study. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. DA.
Thank you, Chairperson. I rise on behalf of the Democratic Alliance to move without notice
that this House notes that Adelaide Hlongwane and Happy
Honorable members, please. Honorable members, please give her a chance. You can start from the beginning, honorable member.
Thank you, Chairperson. I rise on behalf of the Democratic Alliance to move without notice that this House notes that Adelaide Hlongwane and Happy Romano took first place at the 2022 World Dance Council Amateur League World Championships. Note that this Limpopo pair had to plead for donations in order to participate in the competition from the 4th of November to the 14th of November this year. South Africans were quick to respond, and their costs of flight, food, hair, dance attire, and shoes enabled them to compete in this prestigious event. Note that over the 7 days, the couple competed against other professional dance couples from around the world in the Latin American cha-cha, samba, rumba, paso doble, and jive dance styles. Performing in front of 40 qualified dance adjudicators from around the world, the competitors were judged on best dressed, best rehearsed, best performance per dance, and more. Further note that Hlongwane and Romano won a recognition gold WDCAL engraved gold medal, as well as a letter of authority to the South African Dance Committee stating that the couple must be taken care of in terms of dance essentials. Note that this was the couple's first competition aboard, and that they have brought South
Thank you
Africa
very much,
and
honorable
proud
member.
Limpopo on the dance map. We thank them for flying the SA flying flag.
Thank you
And
very
I
much.
so move. Thank you.
Honorable Tebo Holsier. I put the motion. No objections. The motion is agreed to. PAC. Al-Jama.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. The Al-Jama Party moves without notice that the House notes the proceedings of the reopening of the inquest of anti-apartheid activist Martha Imam Abdullah Harun, which started in the Cape High Court on the 7th of November 2022. Further notes that the inquest has been postponed on the 5th November until next year for arguments. Recognize that Imam Harun was killed in detention on the 27th of September 1969. Further recognize the struggle of the Harun family and other support structures for their steadfastness for the reopening of the inquest. Acknowledge that the reopening of the inquest sparked of hope to justice to other families, nearly 1,000, whose loved ones were also killed in detention or in other circumstances by the former apartheid security branch police. Further acknowledges that the House notes with concern that the process for the reopening of the inquest took nearly 53 years. Considers the House joins the family in grief as they find some comfort of, as they find some form of comfort and closure. I so move.
Thank you very much. If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, motion agreed to. ANC.
The African National Congress moves without notice that the House knows that Ms. Gloria Serobe, co-founder of Withhold and the chairperson of the Solidarity Fund, was honored recently at the Sunday Times Top 100 Companies event for her decade-long contribution to business and empowerment. Further notes that Serobe was named this year a recipient of Lifetime Achiever Awards. Understand that her business acumen is steeped in a social transformation with the goal of to empower women, especially through social inclusive economic model to uplift marginalized rural women through interventions underpinned by agriculture and tourism. Further understand that with her partners, Serobe created and built Withhold from the ground up, and the organization lists Withhold Investment Trust as having more than 1,200 direct and 18,000 indirect women beneficiaries, and congratulate Ms. Robe on her much deserved awards. Ke a leboga modulasetulo.
Thank you, Honorable Member. If there are no objections, I put the motion. Then there's no objections, the motion is agreed to. Notices of motions. Oh, that concludes the motions without notice. We now come to the notices of motion. The last item on the order paper is notices of motions. Does any member of the ANC wish to give a notice of motion?
Chairperson, I hereby move on behalf of the African National Congress in the House in its next sitting debate, improving the ability. I hereby move on behalf of the African National Congress in the House in its next sitting debate, the Heidedal mine quarry and other mine quarries which are unsafe and lead to the deaths of our children. These quarries are more dangerous than pit bulls.
Thank you very much. EFF. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Economic Freedom Fighters for the House to discuss in its sitting the breakdown of all municipal contracts and private businesses who owe monies to, and the implications that it has on basic services in the country. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Member. My apologies to the DA. Thank you, Honorable Member, from the EFF. DA.
Thank you, Chair. Apology accepted. Chair, I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debates the long-term economic effect that regulatory reform will have on small business development and job creation. I so move.
Thank you very much. ANC.
Thank you, Chair. I, on behalf of the African National Congress, move that the House at its next sitting debate improving the ability of all spheres of government to contribute towards disaster management. I so move.
Thank you very much. IFP.
Thank you very much, Chair. On behalf of Inkatha Freedom Party, I hereby give notice that at the next sitting, this House debate the ever-increasing existential threat to safety and security posed by organized crime syndicates currently operating in South Africa. The policy changes required an immediate intervention that should be put in place to reduce such risk. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. FF plus.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Ek stel voor namens die VF+ dat die huis met die volgende sitting debatteer oor die invloed wat artikel 235 van die Grondwet oor selfbeskikking op basiese en hoër onderwys behoort te hê. Aangesien daardie artikel die staat se territoriale eenheid beskerm deur die kulturele verskeidenheid te erken in teenstelling met onderwysowerhede wat druk laat opbou deur verskeidenheid te misken. Dankie.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that the House at its next sitting debate mobilizing communities and society broadly around issues of corruption and by emphasizing the culture of exposing corruption and protecting whistleblowers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. The ACDP will move at the next sitting of the House that the House debates increase in economic sabotage, vandalism, and theft of economic infrastructure across the country and at Eskom, Transnet, and other state-owned companies in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much. UDM. ATM. DA.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debates the need for the Department of Health to adequately provide for the mental health needs of healthcare workers in the country. I so move.
Thank you very much. EFF.
Thank you, House Chair. As EFF, I move in this next sitting, we plead the House to debate about the violence that has happening in the Eastern Cape province. Young children are being killed, brutally killed by their relatives, but there has been no arrest. On the 20th of November this year, a father killed his 13-year-old daughter and a 9-year nephew. And in Engcobo, there is a woman that killed her 4 children with hammer. So I plead the Department of Social Development and also the Justice Department to debate with those families about this issue. I so move. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. ANC.
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that the House at its next sitting debate the holistic approach to deal with the challenge of criminality of illegal mining, which has a negative effect on the economy and national security of the country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Would NFP, ANC.
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that the House at its next sitting debate the strengthening of security measures at police stations to prevent police station robberies, which pose a serious threat to the security of the country. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you very much. AIC. ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. I here move on behalf of the ANC that the House at its next sitting debate the measures geared at curtailing illegal land invasions and land occupations, which are detrimental to orderly disruptions of land.
Thank you very much. GA.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I hereby give notice on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next
Thank you,
sitting.
honorable members. Thank you. GA.
I hereby give notice on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debate the need for a National Commission of Inquiry into the endemic police corruption in the country and its effect on the safety of South Africans in all provinces. I so move.
Thank you very much. Al Jama. Sorry, PAC, if it's there. Al Jama.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. I'm MG Hendricks. Hereby gave notice that after the inquest evidence of horrific bruises inflicted on Imam Abdullah Harun, that on the next sitting day, the House debate the forfeiture of former special branch members' pension benefits who are guilty of torture. I shall move.
Thank you very much. ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the African National Congress that the House at its next sitting debate the strengthening of intervention geared at eradicating the proliferation of illegal guns, which are the most commonly used murder weapon in the country. I so move.
Thank you very much. That concludes notices of motion and the business for the day. The House is adjourned.